Tonight, before we bring a long day to a close and allow our minds to gently drift into sleep, I would like to invite you on a very special journey. A journey that will not only carry us across hundreds of thousands of kilometers of endless space, but also take us back to one of the most extraordinary moments in human history. The moment when human beings first left the familiar world they had always known and set foot upon another world. But perhaps the story of the moon landing did not truly begin on the day Neil Armstrong stepped down the ladder of the Eagle lunar module. Perhaps it began much earlier. It began when the first human beings gazed up into the night sky, when our ancestors sat beside the fire and wondered what might exist beyond the stars above them, when the moon became a symbol of mystery, of dreams, and of all that remained undiscovered. The psychologist Carl Gustav Jung believed that certain symbols exist deep within the collective unconscious of humanity, and throughout thousands of years, the moon has always been one of those symbols. It represents the unknown, the places where no one has yet set foot, the deepest regions of the human soul that we have always longed to explore. And so, when Apollo 11 turned its course toward the moon in the summer of 1969, it was not merely a scientific mission. It was the moment when one of humanity's oldest dreams began to become reality. On tonight's journey, we will explore 100 fascinating facts about the moon landing. We will meet the people who made what once seemed impossible become possible. We will discover breathtaking moments that stood only seconds away from failure. We will walk upon the quietest landscape human beings have ever touched. And together, we will reflect on how that voyage forever changed the way we see ourselves, our Earth, and humanity's place within the vast universe. If you enjoyed gentle historical stories, explorations of the human mind through the lens of Carl Jung, and videos designed to accompany you before sleep, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue creating slow, thoughtful, and inspiring journeys like this one. Now, allow your body to relax. Let your eyes grow a little heavier. Let the remaining thoughts of today gradually settle into stillness. And as the night sky opens above us, let us begin our journey to the moon. A journey not only through space, but through the greatest dreams humanity has ever dared to pursue. The dream of reaching the moon. If, on a quiet night, you step outside and look up at the sky, you will likely see the moon hanging silently in the vastness above. It appears so familiar that we rarely pause to truly think about it. Night after night, month after month, century after century, the moon remains there, quietly watching human history unfold below. It has witnessed empires rise and fall. It has seen wars, explorations, inventions, and dreams. It has illuminated caravans crossing deserts, sailors navigating vast oceans, poets searching for inspiration, and children lying beneath the night sky, wondering what might exist beyond that silver light. For thousands of years, the moon has been more than a celestial body. It has been a symbol, a mystery, a question without an answer. Carl Gustav Jung devoted much of his life to studying the symbols that appear again and again in dreams, myths, and the collective psyche of humanity. He observed that certain images seem to exist beyond every culture and every era. They appear in different places yet carry remarkably similar meanings. These are archetypes, ancient symbols residing deep within the collective unconscious. And throughout countless civilizations, the moon has always been one of the most powerful of these symbols. It represents the unknown, the lands beyond the reach of familiar light, the mysterious realm that humanity has always longed to explore, but could never quite touch. Perhaps that is why, thousands of years before rockets were invented, before modern science emerged, human beings had already begun telling stories about the moon. The ancient Greeks imagined gods residing there. The Chinese told stories of Chang'e living within a palace upon the moon. Indigenous peoples in many parts of the world saw sacred images etched across its luminous surface, Each culture told a different story, yet they all shared something in common. They sensed that the moon was more than a rock drifting through space. It was an invitation toward the unknown. And then, as history entered the 20th century, that invitation began to feel more real than ever before. Human beings no longer simply looked up at the sky. They began thinking about reaching it. It sounded like a crazy idea. Even to many people at the time, it seemed almost impossible. After all, imagine this. For most of human history, the fastest speed humanity had ever known was the speed of a horse. Then came sailing ships, then trains, then automobiles, and within a surprisingly short span of time, aeroplanes appeared. Yet the distance between flying through the sky and setting foot on the moon was almost the distance between two different worlds. And yet it is often these seemingly impossible dreams that drive humanity forward. Jung once wrote that within every person there exists a deep impulse toward the expansion of consciousness, a need to explore what lies beyond familiar boundaries. Perhaps, on a larger scale, humanity itself carries that same impulse. We build ships to cross oceans. We climb the highest mountains. We travel to lands that have never appeared on maps. And eventually, we look toward the sky, for after every continent had been explored, only one final ocean remained: space. But to understand why that dream became reality in 1969, we must return to a turbulent period in history, the 1960s, an age of profound transformation. The world was divided by the Cold War. The two greatest superpowers on Earth, the United States and the Soviet Union, were competing in nearly every arena: politics, military power, science, technology. Every new achievement carried meaning far beyond itself. It became a symbol of the strength of an entire system, and then that competition expanded into the sky. In 1957, the Soviet Union astonished the world by successfully launching Sputnik. For the first time in history, a human-made object orbited the Earth. The simple beep, 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 transmitted from that satellite, echoed across the planet like a signal announcing that a new era had begun. Soon afterward, the Soviet Union continued to lead. They sent the first living creature into space. They sent the first human being into Earth's orbit. The name Yuri Gagarin quickly became legendary. In the eyes of many, the space race already seemed to have a winner. And it was in this atmosphere that a bold challenge was issued. A challenge that many believed was impossible. On the 25th of May, 1961, President John F. Kennedy stood before the United States Congress and announced a goal that stunned the world: to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. Today, looking back, we know that it happened. But in 1961, it seemed like a promise that reached far beyond the technological capabilities of the era. In fact, when Kennedy made that declaration, the United States had not yet even placed an astronaut into orbit around Earth. Many of the technologies required for such a journey did not yet exist. The computers that would eventually guide the Apollo spacecraft had not yet been built. Many essential techniques existed only on paper, but perhaps that is precisely what made the declaration so extraordinary. Human beings did not choose that goal because it was easy. They chose it because it was difficult. Because sometimes it is the greatest dreams that possess the power to pull us beyond our previous limitations. And from that moment, one of the most extraordinary projects in human history began to take shape. A project that did not belong to a single person, not to a single astronaut, not even to a single nation, but to the efforts of hundreds of thousands of people moving toward a goal that seemed almost impossible to achieve. And in the next chapter of our story, we will begin exploring how those people built a pathway from Earth to the moon, one step at a time, through science, courage, and an almost unshakable faith in humanity's potential. The journey to another world. When President Kennedy's bold promise echoed across the early 1960s, many people regarded it as a dream that could scarcely be achieved. but history is sometimes shaped by those courageous enough to believe in things that do not yet exist. And after years of relentless work by hundreds of thousands of engineers, scientists, technicians, and astronauts, the moment finally arrived. The dream was no longer confined to paper. It was no longer a speech, no longer a collection of blueprints spread across drafting tables. The dream now stood towering upon a launch pad at Cape Kennedy, pointing toward the sky. Its name was Saturn V. In the dawn light of the 16th of July 1969, Saturn V appeared like a structure from the future, more than 110 meters tall, roughly the height of a 36-story building. It was not merely the largest rocket ever placed into operation. It was the most powerful machine humanity had ever built for the purpose of carrying life away from Earth. From a distance, Saturn V appeared motionless, still, silent beneath the Florida sky. Yet within that white exterior rested an immense power waiting to be released. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Saturn V was not its steel or its fuel. It was that it represented the physical form of a collective dream, a dream imagined by millions, a dream that had lived within mythology, literature, and the human imagination for thousands of years. For the first time in history, that dream had a shape, a mass, engines, and it was preparing to fly. Inside the top of Saturn V sat three human beings: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. Today, their names have become part of history. But on that morning, they were simply three men preparing to undertake a journey no one had ever experienced before. Interestingly, they were very different from one another. Armstrong was calm, reserved, and exceptionally careful. Buzz Aldrin was an engineer with a sharp analytical mind. Michael Collins possessed remarkable composure and a wonderful sense of humor. Three different personalities, three different life stories. Yet now they sat together inside a small spacecraft, preparing to leave their home planet behind. Jung believed that every journey toward maturity requires a moment of departure from the familiar. He described it as entering the unknown. For every genuine transformation begins when we step beyond old boundaries, and there is no boundary greater than Earth itself. Throughout most of human history, the sky was the final frontier. No one could cross it. No one could live beyond it. Yet within only a few minutes, those three men would do something their ancestors had never even dared imagine. It is difficult to fully grasp the speed of technological progress during the 20th century. Only 66 years earlier, in 1903, the Wright brothers completed the first powered flight. Their aircraft traveled only a short distance. It remained in the air for less than a minute, a brief moment. Yet from that moment, a path had begun. And now, only 66 years later, humanity was no longer debating whether flight was possible. We were preparing to fly to another world. If all of human history were compressed into a single 24-hour day, that transformation would occur almost in the blink of an eye. And that realization reveals something remarkable. Human potential is often far greater than we believe, because today's limits are sometimes nothing more than temporary markers. At 9:32 inches the morning, the engines of Saturn V ignited. At first, there was only light, then fire. Then the ground began to tremble. Thousands of tons of fuel burned every second. A colossal column of energy erupted beneath the rocket. The sound was so powerful that it could be felt through the body before it could be heard by the ears. Windows rattled kilometers away. The ground vibrated. The air vibrated. Everything vibrated. And yet Saturn V still had not left the launch pad. It was too heavy, too massive. It almost seemed as though the Earth itself was trying to hold it back. Then slowly, very slowly, the rocket began to move. A few centimeters, then a few meters, then faster and faster. That moment felt like something stepping out of history and into the future. Perhaps none of the people watching that day truly saw a machine. They saw hope. They saw courage. They saw what human beings can achieve when united in pursuit of a great purpose. Jung observed that cultures all around the world tell remarkably similar stories. The hero leaves home, enters the unknown, faces trials, then returns with new understanding. Apollo 11 carried the structure of that very myth. But this time, the hero was not an individual. The hero was humanity itself. As Saturn V continued climbing into the sky, the Earth below gradually became smaller. The oceans, the cities, the fields, the borders that humanity had spent centuries drawing, all slowly faded into the distance. And then, for the first time, 3 human beings began a journey nearly 400,000 kilometers long toward the moon, a distance so vast that the mind struggles to comprehend it. If one were to drive continuously without stopping, the journey would take many months. If one were to walk, it might take years. But now they were flying through the black emptiness between 2 worlds. Behind them lay their home planet. Ahead of them lay the moon. Between them stretched the infinite silence of space. Perhaps it was one of the most symbolic moments in all of human history. For the first time, humanity was not merely exploring a new continent, not merely crossing a new ocean. We were leaving the very world that had given us birth. And as the blue glow of Earth slowly receded beyond the spacecraft window, an entirely new chapter in the human story began to unfold. But the journey to the moon was still far from over, and the greatest challenges were still waiting ahead. For only a few days later, during the final minutes of the landing, everything would become more fragile than anyone had imagined. History would be decided within a matter of seconds, and that is the story of the next chapter. Eagle's breathless descent. As Apollo 11 moved farther away from Earth, the journey seemed to enter a calmer phase. Behind them was the familiar blue planet. Ahead of them was the moon, a world that had existed within humanity's stories for thousands of years. During the quiet days drifting through the stillness of space, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins carried out routine checks, monitored systems, and prepared for the most important moment of the mission. But like many great stories throughout history, the true challenge did not appear at the beginning. It appeared just before the dream became reality. Carl Jung observed that in ancient myths, the hero must always pass through a final trial before reaching what he seeks, not because fate wishes to stop him, but because true transformation always requires courage. In the story of Apollo 11, that trial arrived in the form of a few brief minutes, a few minutes during which every second had the power to change history. On the 20th of July, 1969, as the lunar module Eagle separated from the command module Columbia, Michael Collins remained in orbit around the moon. Meanwhile, Armstrong and Aldrin began their gradual descent toward the surface. Outside the window, the landscape appeared unlike anything human beings had ever known. No oceans, no trees, no clouds, no life. Only plains of gray dust, ancient craters, and scattered rocks lying motionless beneath the sunlight. Everything seemed so quiet that even time itself appeared to slow down. But inside Eagle, the opposite was true. Systems operated continuously. Data streamed in without interruption. The astronauts had to monitor dozens of readings simultaneously. Mission Control in Houston watched every signal with equal intensity, because they knew that no one had ever done this before. There were no perfect maps, no practical experience, no one to ask for advice. Every meter of descent entered unexplored territory. At first, everything unfolded according to plan. Eagle continued lowering its altitude. The distance between the spacecraft and the surface steadily decreased. Then something unexpected happened. A warning appeared on the computer screen. I10 Lambaling A. Then another warning. I10 Lambaling E. Today, those numbers may seem meaningless, but at the time, They sounded like alarm bells ringing in the darkness. No one knew exactly what they meant. No one knew whether the system was about to fail. Inside Eagle, Armstrong and Aldrin remained focused. In Houston, dozens of specialists rapidly analyzed the situation. Some of NASA's brightest minds were trying to answer a single question. Should they continue the landing, or should the mission be aborted? Remarkably, the Apollo 11 guidance computer, one of the most advanced computers in the world in 1969, possessed far less processing power than ordinary electronic devices today. Yet it was performing a task without precedent, and now it was overloaded. Fortunately, the engineers realized that the system was still functioning. The computer was prioritizing its most important tasks. It could still guide the spacecraft. A message came from Houston. Continue. Eagle continued its descent. But that was only the beginning. As the module moved closer to the surface, Armstrong noticed another problem. The location chosen by the computer was not flat at all. Instead of the open landing area they had expected, a large field of boulders stretched below. Massive rocks were scattered everywhere. If Eagle landed there, its landing gear could collapse. The module could tip over, or worse, the mission could end in disaster. In that moment, Armstrong had to make a decision that allowed no time for lengthy deliberation. He switched to manual control. It was a deeply symbolic act. For years, thousands of engineers had designed computers to perform most of the work, yet at the most critical moment, everything returned to a human being. A pair of eyes, a pair of hands, a calm and focused mind. Perhaps this is one of Apollo 11's most beautiful lessons. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." In the most important moments of life, we cannot rely entirely upon technology, procedures, or programmed instructions. Ultimately, what matters most is human presence, the ability to remain calm amid uncertainty, the ability to see a path when everything becomes unclear. Armstrong guided Eagle beyond the dangerous area. He searched for a safer landing site. Meanwhile, the fuel continued to decrease. Every passing second became precious. Back in Houston, mission controllers watched the remaining fuel supply. 60 seconds, then 30 seconds. Those numbers would quickly become part of Apollo legend, because at that moment, no one knew whether they would land in time. Imagine the silence inside Eagle. No music, no cheering, no grand speeches, only complete concentration. Two human beings suspended between success and failure, between history and catastrophe, between dream and reality. There is a special beauty in that moment, because it reveals that humanity's greatest achievements are not always created through dramatic spectacles. Sometimes they are born from calm decisions made in silence, small choices, brief moments unseen by anyone else. And then finally, after all the warnings, calculations, and tension, a signal arrived. Eagle had touched down. Neil Armstrong calmly spoke the words that would become part of history. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Inside mission control, people who had held their breath through the final minutes could finally exhale. One of humanity's oldest dreams had just taken a giant step forward. But remarkably, no one celebrated immediately, because everyone understood what they had just witnessed. Not merely a landing, but the first moment in history when human beings had reached another world. And in the silence of the moon, as Eagle rested upon ancient dust untouched by human footsteps, an entirely new chapter was about to begin. The chapter of a human being opening a spacecraft hatch, descending a small ladder, and leaving the first footprints upon a world beyond Earth. It would become the moment when an entire planet looked toward the sky. And that is the story of the next chapter. The first footstep on the moon. When Neil Armstrong's calm words echoed from the lunar surface, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." A wave of relief spread through mission control in Houston. The men and women who had devoted years of their lives to the Apollo program could finally breathe again. But for Armstrong and Aldrin, the most important part of the journey still lay ahead. They had arrived, yet they had not truly entered this new world. Beyond Eagle's window stretched a landscape untouched by any living being from Earth. A land that had existed for billions of years. A land that had witnessed the formation of Earth's oceans, the appearance of the first living creatures, the rise of the dinosaurs, the evolution of humankind. And now, after all that nearly unimaginable time, two human beings stood only a few meters away. Perhaps in all of human history, few moments have carried such profound symbolic meaning. Carl Jung spent years studying the images that appear in myths and dreams. He discovered that every culture contains a familiar pattern. The hero leaves the old world, passes through trials, and finally enters a new land. A land that symbolizes transformation, a place where the unknown becomes knowable. If we view Apollo 11 as a modern myth, this is that moment. The crossing of the threshold. No distance remained between dream and reality. No ocean, no space, no hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Only a small metal ladder connecting two worlds. During the following hours, Armstrong and Aldrin prepared for the historic moonwalk. They checked life support systems, checked pressure levels, checked communications. Every detail was handled carefully, one step at a time. Nothing could be allowed to go wrong. But beyond those checklists, perhaps another feeling existed. A feeling difficult to name. A feeling any human being would experience when standing before something without precedent. Wonder. Because no one can ever fully prepare for the moment of becoming the first person in history to do something. Finally, that moment arrived. Armstrong opened Eagle's hatch. Sunlight poured inside. Before him stretched the black emptiness of space. Below him lay the ancient grey dust of the moon. Slowly, he began descending the ladder. Every step was broadcast live to Earth. Today, we are accustomed to live images from every corner of the world. But in 1969, it felt almost miraculous. For the first time in history, an event unfolding on another world was being transmitted live to hundreds of millions of people. Imagine that. In small apartments in New York, in homes throughout London, in cafes in Paris, in rooms across Tokyo, in remote villages, people speaking different languages, belonging to different cultures, believing in different ideologies, all watching the same screen, all waiting for the same moment. In an era divided by the Cold War, politics, and profound differences, humanity suddenly shared a common experience, a rare experience that felt almost sacred. For those few brief minutes, borders seemed to disappear, nationalities disappeared, disagreements disappeared. Only one feeling remained: wonder. Perhaps this was what Jung meant by the collective unconscious. Beneath outward differences, human beings still share the same dreams, the same fears, the same longings. The longing to explore, the longing to understand, the longing to transcend limitations. And now the entire planet was witnessing a manifestation of that longing. Armstrong continued descending, step by step, slowly, carefully. Below him lay dust untouched by any footprint. No roads, no maps, no signs of life, only silence. A silence so deep that it felt almost unreal. On Earth, we rarely experience complete silence. There is always wind, always water, always some distant sound. But the moon is different. There is no atmosphere, no sound, no rustling leaves, no crashing waves, no birdsong. If it was somehow possible to remove his spacesuit, which, of course, it was not, Armstrong would hear absolutely nothing. An ancient silence stretching across billions of years. There is something strikingly similar between that image and the deepest layers of the human soul. Jung believed that beneath the noise of everyday life lies a deeper realm, a quieter place, a place containing ancient symbols and timeless truths. Perhaps that is why the moon has always appeared in dreams and myths. It represents the realm of the unknown, the realm of inner mysteries. And now, for the first time in history, a human being stood upon the threshold of that realm. Only one step remained. One single step. A small step physically, but a giant step symbolically. And as Neil Armstrong's left foot began to leave the final rung of the ladder, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, because everyone understood they were about to witness something that had never happened before in all of human history. And then, in that moment, what had existed only in humanity's imagination for thousands of years, finally became real. Neil Armstrong's foot touched the grey dust of the moon. A new footprint appeared upon a world that had never known footprints. A small movement, a simpler action, yet carrying the weight of all human history. In that instant, Armstrong spoke the most famous words in the history of space exploration. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Perhaps Armstrong himself could never have known that those words would be repeated for generations to come, written into history books, quoted in speeches, etched into humanity's collective memory. What makes those words extraordinary is not their elegance. They are not a long speech, not a political declaration, not a poem. They are simple, brief, yet they contain a profound truth, because physically, it truly was only a small step. One man stepping off a ladder, but historically, it was a leap beyond every boundary humanity had ever known. For centuries, human beings had crossed oceans, crossed deserts, crossed mountains, but this was the first time we crossed the boundary of the very world that gave us life. Jung once wrote, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life. Human beings cannot endure a life without meaning." Perhaps that is why moments like Apollo 11 touch something so deep within us. They remind us that human beings do not exist merely to survive. We exist to explore, to seek, to reach towards something greater than ourselves. As Armstrong began walking across the lunar surface, hundreds of millions of people on Earth continued watching. Some historians estimate that approximately 600 million people witnessed the event live, an almost unimaginable number in 1969. Imagine it. In a small farmhouse in rural America, a family sat before a black and white television. In London, a father woke his children in the middle of the night to witness history. In Tokyo, office workers gathered around a screen. In Paris, Berlin, Sydney, Rio de Janeiro, and countless other places, people fixed their eyes upon a blurry image, transmitted from nearly 400,000 kilometers away. The remarkable thing is that they were not simply watching an event, they were sharing a moment. Perhaps for the first time in history, much of humanity looked toward a single point, felt a single emotion, and stood in awe of a single achievement. For those brief moments, the divisions humanity had created seemed to dissolve. There was no east or west, no one nation or another, no skin color, religion, or language. Only a shared feeling remained: wonder. Jung described such moments as encounters with a deeper layer of collective consciousness. Moments when we realize that beneath all differences, something still connects us all. Apollo 11 created one of those moments. Because when people looked at Armstrong on the moon, many no longer saw him simply as an American. They saw a representative of humanity, a human being carrying the hope, curiosity, and courage of an entire species. That became even more evident when Buzz Aldrin descended and joined Armstrong, two human beings standing upon another world. Behind them floated Earth, a small blue sphere suspended within endless darkness. When the astronauts looked up from the moon, they did not see a familiar blue sky. No clouds, no sunsets, no soft colors of an atmosphere. Only the deep blackness of the universe. And within that darkness, Earth appeared like a glowing jewel. Many astronauts later said that seeing Earth from the outside changed them forever, because from that distance, everything looked different. Borders disappeared, conflicts disappeared, divisions disappeared. the entirety of human history, every city, civilization, war, and achievement, all of it existed upon a tiny blue sphere drifting through space. Perhaps that was one of Apollo's greatest lessons. Not merely a lesson in technology, not merely a lesson in science, but a lesson in perspective. Jung believed that maturity often begins when we change the way we see the world. The world does not change, our perspective changes. Apollo 11 did that for humanity. For the first time, we could see our home from the outside, and when we saw it, we began to understand just how fragile it truly is. Meanwhile, on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin continued carrying out their tasks, collecting samples, taking photographs, surveying the surrounding landscape. But beneath those scientific objectives, they were accomplishing something profoundly symbolic. They were proving that limits once considered absolute could be surpassed. For thousands of years, the moon belonged to poems, legends, dreams. Now it had become part of human history as well. That did not diminish its mystery, quite the opposite. It deepened it, because every new discovery does not end a mystery. It simply opens the door to new questions. And perhaps that is the most beautiful thing about humanity. We never stop asking questions, never stop exploring, never stop looking toward the next horizon. As time passed on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin prepared to continue their work. Yet surrounding them was a world stranger than any place on Earth, a world without wind, without water, without sound, a world of absolute silence, a place both desolate and magnificent, a place that Aldrin would later describe with a famous phrase, magnificent desolation. And that strange world will become the destination of the next stage of our journey tonight. For after the first footsteps, humanity began exploring a new question. What is the moon truly like? What kind of world stretches beneath the feet of those pioneers? That is the story of the next chapter, the strange world called the moon. When the first footprints of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin pressed into the grey dust of the moon, humanity was doing more than reaching a new celestial body. We were gazing upon a world entirely different from anything we had ever known on Earth. In the images transmitted back by Apollo 11, the lunar landscape at first appeared simple. Grey plains of dust, ancient impact craters, fields of rocks resting motionless beneath the sunlight. No trees, no oceans, no blue sky, no sign of life whatsoever. Yet the longer one looked, the stranger that world became, and perhaps, in a very different way, the more beautiful it became as well. Buzz Aldrin would later use a famous phrase to describe the scene before him: magnificent desolation. It was an almost perfect description, for the moon is not beautiful in the way a forest is beautiful, not beautiful in the way the ocean is beautiful, not beautiful in the way a sunlit meadow is beautiful. Its beauty emerges from emptiness, from stillness, from the feeling of standing before something so ancient that it stretches beyond the limits of human imagination. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Every encounter between two entities creates transformation." Perhaps humanity's encounter with the moon was such a meeting. For after Apollo 11, it was not only the way we saw the moon that changed, the way we saw ourselves changed as well. Imagine standing beside Armstrong at that moment. Beneath your feet lies dust formed through billions of years of meteorite impacts. Before you stretches a low, gently curved horizon. Above you hangs a sky of pure blackness. Not blue, not the violet shades of twilight, not the orange glow of sunrise, but absolute black. The strange thing is that it was still daytime on the moon. Sunlight flooded the landscape. The astronauts could see their shadows stretching across the surface. Everything was brilliantly illuminated, and yet the sky remained completely black. It was one of the strangest sights human beings had ever witnessed. On Earth, the sky appears blue because sunlight is scattered by the atmosphere. But the moon has no atmosphere. There is no layer of air to soften the light, no atmosphere to create the familiar colors we know, only direct sunlight and absolute darkness. That contrast creates the sensation of standing between two worlds, a world flooded with light and a world of endless darkness. Jung often spoke of the opposites within the human psyche: light and shadow, consciousness and the unconscious, the known and the unknown. Perhaps that is why the moon appears so frequently in dreams and ancient symbols. It represents what lies beyond familiar boundaries, a realm of mystery, a place where ordinary rules no longer apply. As Armstrong and Aldrin walked across that surface, they were not merely exploring geology, they were experiencing what it felt like to stand within a world not designed for human beings. Everything was unfamiliar. The gravity was different. The light was different. The space itself felt different. Even the concept of sound was different. In truth, there is no sound on the moon in the way we understand it. Air is the medium through which sound travels. On Earth, every spoken word, every bird song, every breeze moves through molecules of air. But on the moon, there is no air, no medium through which sound can travel. If a large rock fell only a few meters away, you would hear nothing. If two meteorites collided nearby, you would hear nothing. If you stood beside another person without a radio communication system, you could not speak to one another. It is a silence far beyond anything found on Earth. Not the silence of midnight, not the silence of a desert, not the silence of a winter forest, but absolute silence. A primordial silence, a silence that has endured for billions of years. Perhaps this is one reason so many people feel moved when looking at Apollo photographs. Because amid an age filled with noise, the moon appears as its complete opposite, a world without engines, without traffic, without machinery, without voices, only endless space. Jung believed that beneath the noise of everyday life, there exists a deeper layer of consciousness, a quieter place, a place where human beings can encounter themselves. Perhaps that is why the stillness of the moon feels almost meditative. It resembles a vast mirror reflecting our own smallness. When standing on the moon, everything familiar disappears. No cities, no nations, no civilization, none of the things we usually use to define ourselves. Only a human being standing within the universe. And sometimes it is in such moments that we see ourselves most clearly. Yet the strangeness of the moon does not end there. For the deeper the astronauts explored, the more they realized that this was not merely a silent world. It was a world almost entirely devoid of life. No rivers flowed across those gray plains. No leaves trembled in the wind. No birds crossed the sky. No insects sang in the night. No liquid water. No plants. No animals. No sign of life as we know it. A world completely unlike Earth. And it was precisely this realization that began changing the way astronauts looked at their home planet. But that is a story we will continue exploring in the next stage of tonight's journey. Perhaps what makes the moon most different is not what exists there, but what does not. On Earth, we grow up surrounded by countless signs of life. Birdsong in the morning, leaves rustling in the wind, rain falling upon the ground, rivers flowing endlessly onward. Even in the most remote places on our planet, life exists somewhere, hidden beneath the soil, within the air, within the water, within tiny organisms invisible to the naked eye. Life is so present that we almost take it for granted, but not on the moon. No forests have ever grown there. No oceans have ever glittered beneath the sunlight. No living creature ever left a footprint before Armstrong stepped onto that grey dust. For billions of years, that world remained unchanged in its stillness. And perhaps that is why standing upon the moon carried such emotional power. For the first time in history, humanity had the opportunity to witness a world entirely without life. A world where Earth was no longer the default condition. A world where everything we normally consider ordinary suddenly became extraordinary. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Perhaps one of Apollo's most beautiful paradoxes is this: human beings traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers away from Earth to explore another world. Yet in the end, what they discovered most deeply was the value of their own home planet. From the lunar surface, Earth appeared as a blue and white sphere suspended within endless blackness. Not especially large, not especially prominent, merely a fragile point of light within the universe. Yet within that tiny point of light exists everything we have ever known. Every civilization, every language, every love story, every piece of music, every dream, every war, every victory, every child ever born, every person who ever lived. All of it exists upon that small sphere. When they witnessed this view, many astronauts experienced what later became known as the overview effect, a profound shift in awareness. They no longer saw Earth as a collection of nations, no longer as borders drawn upon maps. They saw a shared home, a rare place, blessed with water, with air, with life, and suddenly, the most familiar things became the most precious. Perhaps this experience closely resembles what Jung described as the expansion of consciousness. Sometimes we must step away from something familiar in order to truly appreciate its value. We must leave home to understand what home means. We must pass through darkness to recognize light. We must encounter emptiness to recognize the beauty of life. The moon did this for humanity. It did not give us a new world in which to live. It gave us a new perspective on the world we already have. There is something fascinating in the cultural history of humankind. For thousands of years, the moon has been a screen upon which humanity projected its dreams. Poets wrote about it. Painters portrayed it. Mythmakers built stories around it. In many cultures, the moon represented mystery, the realm beyond the light of reason, the unexplored depths of existence. From a Jungian perspective, the moon resembles a symbol of the collective unconscious, a realm of the unknown, a place that continually attracts us, even though we never fully understand it. Perhaps that is why the moment of setting foot upon the moon carries such symbolic power, because on a deeper level, this was never merely a physical journey. It was a journey into the unknown, a journey into mystery, a journey toward expanding the boundaries of awareness. And when we finally arrived, what awaited us was not golden cities or ancient civilizations. What awaited us was silence, a silence so profound that it felt almost spiritual. Perhaps that, too, is a beautiful lesson, because we often imagine that answers to life's greatest questions will arrive like thunder, a dramatic discovery, a revelation that changes everything. But sometimes answers arrive in silence, in empty spaces, in moments when we are forced to stop and listen. The moon said nothing to Armstrong and Aldrin. It told them no story, offered no explanation, revealed no secret. It simply existed, silent, ancient, motionless. And within that silence, humanity began hearing its own questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? These are the questions that have accompanied human beings ever since we first looked up at the night sky, and perhaps they will continue to accompany us long after Apollo. As Armstrong and Aldrin continued moving across the surface, they gradually realized that every simple action had become different. Walking was different. Seeing was different. Working was different. Every familiar rule had to be learned again, and that is exactly what we will explore in the next chapter. For setting foot upon the moon was only the beginning. Living and working there was an entirely different challenge. In a world where gravity is only 1/6 that of Earth, where every step resembles a leap, where a spacesuit becomes the only home separating a human being from death. That is the story that awaits us next in tonight's journey. A story about how human beings learned to survive, even if only for a short time, upon a world that was never created for life. Life on the moon. After taking their first steps upon the lunar surface, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin found themselves facing an entirely new question. How do you live and work on a world that was never designed for human beings? For millions of years of evolution, our bodies have been shaped beneath the gravity of Earth. Every step, every breath, every smallest movement, all take place within the silent presence of gravity. We rarely think about it, because it is always there, like air, like sunlight, like the beating of the heart. But on the moon, one of those most familiar laws suddenly changes. Gravity there is only about 1/6 of what it is on Earth. That means a person who weighs 60 kilograms on Earth would feel as though they weighed only about 10 kilograms on the moon. At first, that sounds enjoyable, perhaps even easy. But reality is quite different, because the human body has spent its entire life learning to move within a completely different environment. When Armstrong took his first steps across the grey dust, he quickly realized that walking normally was not the most effective way to move. Each step tended to send his body higher than expected. Every movement felt strange, as though his body were relearning things it had known since birth. Gradually, the astronauts developed a unique way of moving. Instead of walking as they would on Earth, they often used small hopping motions, gentle, slow, almost like children playing inside a dream. When people watch Apollo footage today, many smile at the way the astronauts move. They appear to float, to dance, as though gravity itself had become a slow melody guiding every motion. Yet behind that somewhat amusing image lies an extraordinary reality. Human beings were learning how to exist on a completely unfamiliar world. Carl Jung believed that maturity is not merely the accumulation of knowledge. Sometimes, maturity means learning how to adapt when old rules no longer apply. He once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Perhaps that is exactly what Armstrong and Aldrin were experiencing. The moon did not care about the habits they brought from Earth. It did not care how they had once walked. It did not care what had worked before. It forced them to learn again, to observe, to adapt. And that is often what life asks of all of us. Sometimes we enter a new chapter of our lives and discover that the old formulas no longer work. The things that once brought us success are no longer suitable. The familiar ways of thinking no longer lead us where we need to go. And in those moments, like astronauts on the moon, we must learn how to walk again, slowly, patiently, one step at a time. But if reduced gravity was the first challenge, the spacesuit was perhaps the greatest. Today, when we see Apollo spacesuits displayed in museums, they appear to be little more than bulky clothing. In reality, they were far more complex. Each spacesuit was an engineering marvel, a miniature ecosystem, a personal spacecraft, a thin boundary between life and death. The moon has no atmosphere, no pressure, no protective shield against radiation. Without a spacesuit, a human being could not survive there. The suit was not simply clothing. It was a home, a source of oxygen, a temperature control system, a protective shield, the astronaut's most faithful companion. When Armstrong walked on the moon, he was not truly alone. He carried an entire small world upon his body, a world containing everything necessary to sustain life. Interestingly, the suit was not designed solely by manufacturers of armor or heavy machinery. An important part of its development involved skilled seamstresses and garment specialists, people accustomed to creating intricate clothing, because ultimately, the spacesuit had to accomplish two seemingly opposite goals. It had to be strong enough to protect a human being from a hostile environment, yet flexible enough to allow movement. It was a delicate balance. Like so many things in life, too rigid, and we cannot grow, too fragile, and we cannot survive. Perhaps that is why the Apollo spacesuit became such a beautiful symbol of human adaptability. It was a combination of engineering and artistry, of strength and softness, of science and creativity. Yet even this advanced suit had limitations. Every movement required more effort than usual. Every bend, every turn. Every small action demanded patience, and nowhere was this more apparent than in the hands. The gloves made even the simplest tasks surprisingly difficult. Picking up a small object, pressing a switch, collecting a rock sample, all became activities requiring intense concentration. The fingers could no longer feel every detail as they normally would. The familiar dexterity of touch disappeared, and the astronauts had to learn how to work under entirely new conditions. It is an interesting reminder. Sometimes we only understand the value of ordinary things when they are no longer available, like air, like gravity, like the simple sensation of touching something with bare hands. We rarely think about them until they are gone. And on the moon, many familiar things disappeared in exactly that way. Yet within that absence, Armstrong and Aldrin began discovering new abilities within themselves, abilities they may never have known they possessed. And in the next part of our journey, we will continue venturing deeper into this remarkable world, a world where every breath depends upon technology, where life is sustained by sophisticated systems carried upon the astronauts' backs, and where humanity learned, for the first time, how to carry a miniature version of an entire planet in order to survive within the endless void. If there was one realization that Apollo astronauts quickly reached after stepping onto the moon, it was this: human beings do not belong here. On Earth, we rarely stop to consider how miraculous our environment truly is. Every breath happens naturally. Air is always present. Temperatures generally remain within the range our bodies can tolerate. Atmospheric pressure keeps our blood circulating normally. Water flows across the planet, and life surrounds us everywhere. But on the moon, all of those things disappear. There is no air. Atmospheric pressure is nearly non-existent. Temperatures can swing dramatically between sunlight and shadow. Radiation from the sun constantly strikes the surface. Without technological protection, human life would be measured in seconds. That is why the large backpack attached to Armstrong and Aldrin was far more than a simple device. It was a complete life support system. NASA called it the PLSS, the Portable Life Support System. The name sounds rather technical, but in reality, it was one of the most remarkable inventions of the Apollo program. Inside that rectangular pack was oxygen to breathe, a system for removing carbon dioxide, communication equipment connecting the astronauts to Earth, temperature control mechanisms, electrical power, everything necessary for a human being to survive on a world not meant for life. If Saturn V was the machine that carried humanity to the moon, the PLSS was the machine that allowed humanity to remain there. There is something deeply moving about that image, because when we look closely, we realize that each astronaut was carrying an entire miniature planet upon their back, an artificial atmosphere, a tiny ecosystem, a small version of Earth itself. Carl Jung spent years studying the symbols that emerge from the collective unconscious. He observed that across many cultures, the image of home carries a special meaning. A home is not merely shelter, it symbolizes safety, belonging, life itself. Perhaps the Apollo suit carried a similar meaning. On the moon, the suit was home. It was a homeland, the only place where life could continue. That realization invites reflection on a fascinating truth. No matter how far human beings travel, we always carry a part of Earth with us, not only through technology, not only through life support systems, but within our bodies and our souls. We are products of this planet, formed from water, air, and elements forged within ancient stars. And it is only when we leave Earth that we realize how deeply connected we are to it. While working on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin constantly monitored the condition of their suits, remaining oxygen, body temperature, energy consumption. Everything had to be carefully calculated, because here, even small problems could become major ones. A faulty valve, a damaged tube, a malfunctioning device. Any failure could have serious consequences. This created a fascinating paradox. The journey to the moon is often remembered as a triumph of technology, yet it also reminds us of human fragility. Inside all that advanced engineering remained a human being, a creature that needs oxygen, needs water, needs suitable temperatures, needs very specific conditions in order to survive. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. There is no awakening without challenge." Perhaps Apollo was a form of awakening as well. It revealed humanity's power, but it also revealed our limits. We could reach the moon, yet we still needed an intricate system simply to breathe. We could leave our planet, yet we could never fully escape our dependence upon the things that nurtured us. And perhaps that is not a weakness. Perhaps it is what keeps us humble. One of the most difficult experiences for the astronauts involved using their hands. The thick, rigid gloves protected them from the hostile environment, but they also reduced flexibility. Simple actions that would be effortless on Earth suddenly became complicated. Picking up a rock sample, adjusting equipment, recording observations, everything demanded more effort. It brings to mind another aspect of Jung's philosophy. He believed growth often emerges when we encounter limitations, not when everything is easy, but when we are forced to adapt, forced to discover new ways of solving problems. Apollo stands as a living example of that principle. Every challenge opened the door to a new possibility. Every limitation led to a new invention. Every difficulty became a step forward in human understanding. When we watch old Apollo footage today, we sometimes see only people taking small hops across a grey landscape. Yet behind every hop lie decades of research, hundreds of thousands of hours of work, the intelligence and perseverance of hundreds of thousands of people back on Earth. And during those hours of exploration, another reality gradually emerged. The moon was not merely a strange world. It was also a world full of surprises. Surprises that even NASA had not fully anticipated. Layers of lunar dust as sharp as ground glass. Technical difficulties. Moments that came dangerously close to disaster. Small challenges that could have altered the fate of the entire mission. And in the exploration of any new frontier, this seems to be true. We can prepare carefully. We can create detailed plans. Yet reality always contains the unexpected. Perhaps that is part of the beauty of exploration. For if everything were already known, there would be nothing left to discover. As Armstrong and Aldrin continued their work upon the lunar surface, those unexpected challenges waited quietly ahead. And in the next chapter, we will explore the lesser-known dangers of Apollo 11, from lunar dust as sharp as crushed glass, to a seemingly insignificant broken switch that nearly left the astronauts stranded forever on another world. It is a story of obstacles that rarely appear on commemorative posters, yet they helped shape one of the most astonishing adventures in human history, the unexpected challenges. When we look back at the moon landing today, everything often appears as an almost perfect story. The rocket launches, the spacecraft travels to the moon, the astronauts land safely, collect samples, and then return to Earth in triumph. But real history rarely unfolds in such a neat and orderly way. Beneath the iconic images that have become part of humanity's collective memory lie countless small details, unexpected malfunctions, problems no one anticipated, moments when success and failure were separated by only the thinnest margin. Perhaps this is also what makes Apollo 11 feel so deeply connected to our own lives, because real life never unfolds entirely according to plan. We can prepare, we can calculate, we can predict, but there will always be things that lie beyond the map. Carl Jung once wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." Perhaps Apollo 11 offers a beautiful example of that truth. For even within one of the most carefully planned scientific programs in history, surprise remained present. And one of the greatest surprises was waiting directly beneath the astronauts' feet. It was lunar dust. At first glance, dust seems like a very small problem. On Earth, Dust is simply something that makes us clean our homes. It is more annoying than dangerous. But lunar dust was entirely different. For billions of years, the moon's surface had been continuously struck by meteorites. There was no wind, no water, no weathering processes like those found on Earth. Rock fragments had been shattered into countless microscopic particles with razor-sharp edges, like tiny shards of glass, like invisible miniature blades. As Armstrong and Aldrin walked across the surface, the dust clung to their boots, to their suits, to their equipment. At first, it did not seem particularly important, but very quickly they realized that this dust was unlike anything on Earth. It was not rounded and smooth like beach sand, not soft like ordinary soil. It was sharp, dry, sticky, and extremely difficult to remove. The astronauts described lunar dust as if it possessed a will of its own. It worked its way into joints, clung to zippers, attached itself to metal surfaces, found its way into places where no one wanted it. Interestingly, this was one of those moments when reality differed dramatically from imagination. In earlier science fiction stories, people worried about alien monsters, mysterious creatures, gigantic dangers. But on the moon, one of the greatest challenges came from tiny particles that were almost invisible. It reminds us of a very ordinary truth. Sometimes the greatest difficulties in life do not come from enormous crises. They come from small things that repeat themselves again and again. Things we initially dismiss as unimportant. Jung believed that overlooked things often possess more power than we realize, not only in psychology, but in life itself. A small thought can change a life. A small decision can change a future. And on the moon, a tiny particle of dust could affect an entire mission. When Armstrong and Aldrin returned to Eagle after their work on the surface, they carried dust back inside the cabin. For the first time in history, human beings smelled the moon. And surprisingly, it smelled nothing like people had imagined. Not metallic, not rocky, not like the cold emptiness of space. The astronauts described lunar dust as smelling like spent gunpowder, a familiar scent, appearing in the last place anyone would expect. To this day, scientists continue debating the exact cause of that phenomenon. But for Armstrong and Aldrin, the experience served as a reminder that the moon still held countless mysteries. Even the smallest things could be surprising. And that is the very essence of exploration. We do not travel to new places merely to confirm what we already know. We travel there to encounter what we do not know, to discover things that force us to adjust our understanding of the world. Yet lunar dust was only the beginning. Other challenges still lay ahead, challenges that came not from nature, but from the machines humanity had created. For although Apollo technology was one of the great engineering achievements of the 20th century, it was still built by imperfect human beings. And every system created by human hands carries within it the possibility of failure. Throughout the mission, the astronauts remained keenly aware of that fact. Every switch, every wire, every mechanical component played an important role. Each one was a link in the intricate chain that kept them alive nearly 400,000 kilometers from Earth. It created a very unusual feeling, because on the moon, there was no rescue team waiting nearby, no hospital, no repair shop, no immediate assistance. Everything depended on what they had brought with them, and that made every small detail extraordinarily important. Perhaps this is one of Apollo's deepest lessons. That courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is continuing forward despite knowing that risks exist. It is accepting that not everything lies within our control, and choosing to move forward anyway. And it was precisely as the astronauts prepared to leave the moon that another unexpected challenge appeared. A problem so small that at first it seemed insignificant, yet one that possessed the power to alter the entire history of Apollo 11. A broken switch, a detail that appeared harmless. But in that moment, it became one of the most important objects on the moon. And that is the story we will continue exploring in the next part of tonight's journey. Sometimes the most dangerous moments in history begin with things so small that almost nobody notices them. Not an explosion, not a meteor falling from the sky, not a dramatic failure appearing on a radar screen, but a tiny switch, a technical component small enough to fit on the tip of a finger. After Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin completed their work on the lunar surface and returned to Eagle, they began preparing for the next phase of their journey, leaving the moon. Contrary to what many people imagine, Apollo's difficult work did not end once the landing succeeded. In reality, half the mission still remained, for stepping onto the moon mattered only if the astronauts could return home. Somewhere above them, Michael Collins continued patiently orbiting the moon aboard the command module Columbia. He was waiting for Eagle to lift off, so that the two spacecraft could reunite. The entire plan depended upon Eagle's ascent engine functioning perfectly. If the ignition system failed, Armstrong and Aldrin would be unable to leave the lunar surface. There was no rescue mission, no backup spacecraft, no second chance. That is why, when an engine start switch broke, the seriousness of the situation became immediately clear. According to later reports, while moving around inside Eagle's cramped cabin, part of the equipment accidentally struck the switch that activated the ascent engine. The small switch snapped off. At first glance, it seemed like a minor malfunction. But on the moon, there is no such thing as a minor malfunction. Every component has a purpose. Every detail exists within a chain of interdependence. If the switch failed, the engine might not start. If the engine failed to start, Eagle could not lift off. If Eagle could not lift off, two human beings would remain on the moon forever. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the situation was not the malfunction itself, but the response of those facing it. No panic, no despair, no loss of control, only calm concentration. Once again, it reminded the world of one of the defining qualities of the Apollo astronauts, the ability to keep their minds steady amid the greatest uncertainty. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." In many ways, Apollo stands as a living expression of that idea. The people aboard the mission were not defined by the problems they encountered. They were defined by how they responded to those problems. When examining the broken switch, Buzz Aldrin noticed that the internal mechanism remained intact. Only the outer tip of the switch had broken away. In theory, if something could reach the mechanism inside, the system might still function. But how could they accomplish that on the moon, inside a tiny spacecraft, hundreds of thousands of kilometers from Earth, with no specialized repair kit, no maintenance technician, no replacement parts? That was when one of the simplest objects in spaceflight history entered the story. A felt-tip pen, an ordinary office supply, not an advanced device, not cutting-edge technology, not a sophisticated scientific invention, just a pen. Aldrin realized that the tip of the pen was the right size to reach the mechanism hidden inside the broken switch. Carefully, he inserted it into place, then activated the system, and it worked. There was no triumphant music accompanying that moment, no camera recording it, no millions of viewers watching live, yet it was one of the most extraordinary moments of the entire Apollo 11 mission. Because while we often imagine that history is shaped by enormous machines, sometimes history is saved by surprisingly small objects. There is something deeply human about that story, something simple, something familiar, because it reminds us that solutions do not always emerge from complexity. Sometimes they emerge from observation, from calmness, from creativity appearing at precisely the right moment. Jung often spoke about the importance of adapting to what is actually present before us, not what we wish existed, not what we imagine, but what truly exists. On the moon that day, Armstrong and Aldrin did not possess the ideal tool. They only had what was available inside the spacecraft, and they used it. It is a profound lesson, because many of us spend far too much time waiting for perfect conditions. waiting for the perfect tool, waiting for the perfect moment, when often the solution is already right in front of us. All that is needed is a different perspective, a different approach, a little creativity, a little calmness. Perhaps what continues to inspire people about Apollo after so many decades is not simply that it was a triumph of technology, it was a triumph of the human spirit. Technology played a crucial role, but human beings made the decisions. Human beings adapted when plans failed. Human beings transformed difficulties into opportunities. When we look back at Apollo 11, we usually remember the first footprint on the moon. We remember Saturn V. We remember Armstrong's historic words. But stories like the broken switch and the felt-tip pen reveal another side of the mission, a more humble side, a more ordinary side, and perhaps an even more endearing one, because they remind us that even within the greatest adventures, small details can determine everything. When all systems were finally ready, Armstrong and Aldrin continued preparing for their departure from the moon. But while they faced dust, equipment, and technical risks on the lunar surface, another man was confronting a completely different challenge. A challenge that had nothing to do with machines, nothing to do with switches, nothing to do with engines. It was the challenge of solitude. High above the moon, Michael Collins continued circling silently in Columbia. Several times during each orbit, he disappeared behind the far side of the moon, completely cut off from Earth, completely cut off from his crewmates, alone within the endless void. And it is that story that will lead us into the next chapter, the story of the man many have called the loneliest person in human history, Michael Collins, the loneliest man in history. In the great stories of history, the spotlight usually shines on those who step onto the stage, the people who speak the famous words, the people who appear on the front pages of newspapers, the people who become symbols. Apollo 11 was no exception. When most people think about the moon landing, they immediately remember Neil Armstrong, the first human being to set foot on another world, or Buzz Aldrin, the second man to step onto the moon's grey dust. But somewhere above them, in the almost absolute silence of space, there was another human being, a man who left no footprints on the moon, who did not appear in the most famous photographs, who did not stand before millions of cameras. Yet without him, Apollo 11 would never have become a legend. His name was Michael Collins, and perhaps, for a few extraordinary hours in July of 1969, he became the loneliest human being in history. There is something deeply fascinating about Michael Collins, for he represents a kind of hero that history sometimes overlooks. Not the person standing at the center, but the person quietly making the entire story possible. While Armstrong and Aldrin descended to the lunar surface aboard Eagle, Collins remained behind in the command module Columbia. He continued orbiting the moon, waiting, observing, monitoring systems, preparing for the reunion when Eagle would return. At first, that may sound simple, but in reality, Collins' role was absolutely essential. If Columbia suffered a malfunction, Armstrong and Aldrin would have no way to return to Earth. If Collins made an error in orbit, the entire mission could fail. He was not merely waiting, he was the link that kept the whole journey alive. And there is something curious about that. The most important responsibilities are often the least visible. Carl Jung once wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Each person has a unique role in their journey. Not everyone is born to stand beneath the spotlight. Not everyone is remembered through moments of glory, and that does not diminish their value. Quite the opposite. Often, the most important contributions come from places few people ever notice. Michael Collins embodied that truth. When Eagle separated from Columbia and began its descent toward the moon, Collins remained alone, truly alone, not merely in the ordinary sense, but in a way without precedent in human history. Throughout the journey to the moon, the three astronauts had always been together. They talked, shared responsibilities, checked equipment, supported one another. But now, for the first time since leaving Earth, Collins occupied the spacecraft alone, a single human being, a single living creature, floating between worlds. It is difficult to imagine what that felt like, because even those who live alone on Earth are not truly alone in the same way. They know that beyond their room lies a city. Beyond that city lie millions of other people. Someone is always nearby. Humanity is always present somewhere around us. But for Collins, things were different. There were moments when the distance between him and every other human being exceeded any distance ever experienced by anyone before. Whenever Columbia passed behind the moon, something remarkable happened. All communication disappeared. No signal from Earth. No signal from Houston. No signal from Armstrong. No signal from Aldrin. No one. Nothing. Only Michael Collins. And silence. Not the silence of a room. Not the silence of midnight. But the silence of the universe itself. A silence so profound that it almost defies description. During those minutes, he became the most isolated human being who had ever lived. Alone behind another world, unable to see Earth, unable to hear a human voice, without any direct evidence that human civilization still existed, only the instruments inside the spacecraft, small lights glowing softly, the familiar sounds of life support systems, and the beating of his own heart. Perhaps this is where the Apollo story touches a deeper level of meaning. Jung spent much of his life exploring the nature of solitude. Not loneliness as sadness, but solitude as a necessary part of growth. Hilkes. He once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." Perhaps during those silent orbits, Collins experienced something very rare, a meeting with himself, no longer surrounded by the noise of the world, no longer occupied by endless conversations, no longer immersed in constant activity, only thoughts, memories, and the awareness that he was farther from humanity than any person had ever been before. What is remarkable is that Collins did not describe the experience as frightening, quite the opposite. He often spoke about it with calmness, sometimes even with enjoyment. He did not feel abandoned. He understood his role. He understood why he was there. And perhaps that made all the difference. For when a person finds meaning in their mission, loneliness can become stillness, and stillness can become strength. Yet another thought remained before him, a possibility that NASA had considered from the very beginning, a possibility so unsettling that few people wanted to speak about it aloud. What if Eagle could not lift off? What if Armstrong and Aldrin became stranded on the moon? What if Michael Collins became the only astronaut able to return to Earth? That question would accompany him through the orbits that followed, and it is also the question that carries us deeper into tonight's journey. While Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin worked on the lunar surface, Michael Collins continued making his steady revolutions overhead. From that distance, he could not see Eagle. He could not see his crewmates. He could not know exactly what they were doing at every moment. He only knew that somewhere beneath the grey lunar dust, two human beings were carrying out one of the most important missions in history, and he was waiting for them to return. Yet beneath that professional calmness lay a possibility that everyone involved in Apollo understood, a possibility no one wanted to speak aloud. What if Eagle could not take off? Today, looking back on Apollo 11 as a story with a happy ending, it is easy to forget that in July 1969, nothing was guaranteed. No one knew for certain that everything would go according to plan. No one knew for certain that the ascent engine would function perfectly. No one knew for certain that an unexpected failure would not appear at the final moment. NASA prepared for countless scenarios, and one of them was the most heartbreaking of all. If Eagle could not leave the moon, Michael Collins would have to return to Earth alone. Pause for a moment and consider what that truly means. 3 people left Earth together. 3 people shared the same dream. 3 people crossed nearly 400,000 kilometers of space together. Yet only one would come home. Not because he wanted to, but because the mission demanded it. It was a responsibility almost beyond imagination. Some burdens cannot be measured in kilograms, cannot be measured in distance, cannot be measured in time. They can only be measured in human emotion. This was one of those burdens. In later years, Collins wrote and spoke honestly about that possibility. What is remarkable is that he did not spend his time consumed by fear. He focused on the mission. He understood that if the worst happened, his responsibility would still be to bring Columbia safely home. There is something extraordinary in that attitude. Not coldness, not indifference, but mature acceptance of reality. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Perhaps Collins embodied that spirit perfectly. He could not control everything that happened. No one can. But he could control how he responded. And that is a very quiet kind of strength. Not loud, not dramatic, but profoundly deep. In many of the myths Jung studied, the hero must enter a solitary land, a place where no one can accompany them, a place where they must face themselves. Apollo 11 had such a moment. The difference is that the person experiencing it was not Armstrong, not Aldrin, but Collins. Whenever Columbia disappeared behind the moon, communication with Earth vanished completely. For those minutes, Michael Collins truly became the human being most distant from the rest of humanity. From a physical perspective, he may have been the loneliest person who ever lived. Yet perhaps the psychological dimension is even more fascinating. Because loneliness and solitude are not always the same thing. Many people living in crowded cities feel lonely. Many people surrounded by hundreds of others feel disconnected. Meanwhile, Collins was hundreds of thousands of kilometers away from everyone. Yet he was not consumed by loneliness. He had a purpose, a mission, a clear sense of meaning. And Jung believed that meaning is one of the greatest sources of strength within the human soul. When we understand why we are doing something, we can endure extraordinary challenges. Perhaps that is why Collins remained so calm. He understood his role. He did not need to become the first man on the moon to know his worth. He did not need the spotlight to know he mattered. He understood that Apollo's success depended upon everyone, not only those who appeared in the historic photographs. It is a beautiful lesson, because in life, we are often drawn toward visible achievements, prominent positions, public recognition, moments of applause. Yet most of the good things in this world are created by people working quietly behind the scenes. People who never appear on front pages. People who receive little recognition, yet continue doing their part faithfully. Michael Collins remains one of the most beautiful symbols of that kind of hero. When Eagle finally lifted off from the moon and returned to orbit, Collins began preparing for the rendezvous. It was one of the most important meetings in human history. Two small spacecraft moving through space at thousands of kilometers per hour. They had to meet precisely, dock precisely, with almost no margin for error. And then, at last, what everyone had hoped for finally happened. Armstrong and Aldrin returned. Apollo 11 became a crew of 3 once again. Perhaps very few people truly understand the relief Collins must have felt in that moment. Not only because the mission had succeeded, but because his friends had come back, safe, whole, together. Today, Michael Collins is often remembered simply as the man who stayed in orbit. But that description is not entirely fair, because he did not merely stay behind. He kept the road home open. He protected the final link in the chain. He became the bridge between the moon and Earth, between dream and reality, between exploration and homecoming. And perhaps that is why his story continues to touch so many hearts, because it reminds us that not every contribution needs to be visible to be great. Not every hero stands at the center of the stage. Sometimes the most important people are the ones quietly ensuring that the story can continue. As Columbia continued its journey around the moon with all 3 astronauts safely aboard, a new chapter of Apollo began. Now the focus was no longer on reaching the moon. It was on what humanity had learned from it. the rock samples that had been collected, the instruments that had been deployed, the first scientific data ever brought back from another world. And it is those discoveries that will guide us into the next chapter. A chapter not only about human courage, but about knowledge, about curiosity, and about humanity's enduring desire to better understand its place within the universe. Science on the Moon. When people think of Apollo 11, most remember the iconic images. Neil Armstrong stepping down the ladder of Eagle, the first footprint pressed into the grey dust, the flag standing seemingly upright in a world without wind, the words that became part of history. But if we look more deeply, we begin to realize that Apollo 11 was not merely an adventure, not merely a political victory, not merely a technological achievement. Above all, it was a journey in search of knowledge, a journey driven by one of humanity's oldest instincts, curiosity. Ever since our ancestors first looked up at the night sky, the moon has existed as a mystery. It appeared in myths, in poetry, in ancient legends, in stories shared around fires. Yet for thousands of years, all human beings could do was observe it from afar. We could see it, but we could not touch it. We could imagine it, but we could not know for certain what awaited upon its surface. And then, in 1969, for the first time in history, humanity did more than look at the moon. We stepped onto it, carrying scientific instruments, carrying questions, carrying a desire to understand. Perhaps this is where Apollo reveals its most beautiful dimension. For the ultimate goal was never simply to stand upon the moon, it was to learn from it. Carl Jung once wrote, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps the few kilograms of lunar rocks brought home by Armstrong and Aldrin are a perfect illustration of that idea. At first glance, moon rocks do not appear extraordinary. They are not gold, not diamonds, not glittering treasures. They are simply grey stones, fragments of dust and rock, samples so ordinary looking that many people might walk past them without a second glance. Yet their value does not lie in their appearance. Their value lies in the stories they carry. For each stone is a fragment of the universe's memory, a page from a diary written billions of years ago. When Armstrong and Aldrin bent down to collect those first samples, they were not merely picking up rocks. They were gathering time, gathering history, gathering clues that might help humanity better understand its own origins. There is something about this that recalls Jung's work. For decades, he explored the deepest layers of the human mind, searching for ancient symbols, images that appeared in dreams, traces of the past still living within the present. Apollo scientists were doing something similar in their own way. They were digging into the moon's past, searching for evidence of the solar system's formation, searching for answers to the question of where we come from. One of the most astonishing things about the moon is that it resembles a vast natural museum. On Earth, wind and water constantly reshape the landscape. Mountains erode, rivers change course, forests appear and disappear. The marks of the past are often erased with time, but the moon is different. There is no wind, no rain, no oceans, no living ecosystems transforming the surface. Events that occurred millions or even billions of years ago can remain preserved, like an ancient book that has never been edited, like a photograph carefully protected across immense stretches of time. And that is precisely why lunar rocks became so valuable. When scientists began studying the samples returned by Apollo, they discovered that many lunar rocks were extraordinarily ancient. Some had formed during the earliest stages of the solar system, older than almost anything still preserved upon Earth's surface. Suddenly, those seemingly ordinary stones became ancient witnesses, silent storytellers from the dawn of the planetary age. There is something beautiful about that image, because it reminds us that knowledge often arrives through patience, not through explosions, not through dramatic moments, but through careful observation, through listening to small things. A stone can tell a story if we know how to listen. Jung could spend hours analyzing a single symbol that appeared in a patient's dream. Geologists spent years studying a single Apollo rock sample. Both understood the same truth. Great revelations are often hidden inside small details. Beyond collecting samples, Armstrong and Aldrin also carried the first scientific instruments ever deployed on the moon. Compared with modern technology, those instruments may seem simple, but at the time, they represented a giant leap forward. They transformed the moon from an object of observation into a true laboratory. One of the most important instruments was a seismic detector, a device designed to listen to the vibrations of that distant world. Just as psychologists listened to the hidden movements of the human soul, scientists wanted to listen to the hidden movements within the moon. They wanted to know whether that seemingly silent world was truly still. And the answer surprised many people, because the moon experiences its own form of earthquakes. Vibrations, later known as moonquakes, a world that appeared completely lifeless, turned out to possess its own rhythms, its own subtle movements beneath the ancient grey dust. And those discoveries opened the door to even larger questions. How was the moon truly formed? What relationship does it share with Earth? Do these two worlds tell the same story from the beginning? If the lunar rocks were ancient pages from the universe's diary, then one of the devices Apollo 11 left behind became something else entirely: a bridge. An invisible bridge connecting two worlds, a bridge that continues to function even today. Among all the equipment carried on the mission was an object that looked remarkably modest. It did not glow. It did not move. It did not produce dramatic images. It was a laser reflector, a collection of specially designed prisms built to reflect light back toward its source. At first glance, that seems simple, yet its significance is profound. After Apollo 11, scientists on Earth began firing powerful laser beams toward the moon. The light traveled nearly 400,000 kilometers through space, reached the reflector, and returned. By measuring the journey with extraordinary precision, scientists could determine the exact distance between Earth and the moon. Today, more than half a century after Apollo 11, those measurements are still being made. There is something beautiful about that image. Each night, while many people sleep, invisible beams of light continue their familiar voyage from Earth to the moon and back again, like a quiet conversation continuing across generations, like a reminder that Apollo's footsteps did not truly end in 1969. They continue to echo through modern science. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Although he wrote those words within the context of psychology, perhaps they also apply to humanity's exploration of the universe. For the more we learn about other worlds, the more we learn about ourselves. The more we study the moon, the more we understand Earth. And it was the Apollo rock samples that led to one of the most important discoveries in planetary science. For centuries, humanity did not know how the moon formed. Many theories were proposed. Some scientists believed the moon had formed elsewhere and was later captured by Earth's gravity. Others thought it formed alongside Earth. Still others imagined entirely different scenarios. But the Apollo samples began telling a new story, a story far stranger than anyone expected. Researchers discovered that lunar rocks shared remarkable chemical similarities with rocks from Earth. Unlike other bodies in the solar system, not completely different, as many had assumed, but strikingly alike, as though they shared a common origin. Gradually, from this evidence, a new theory emerged. Today it is known as the giant impact hypothesis. According to this theory, about 4.5 billion years ago, when the solar system was still young, the early Earth collided with a celestial body roughly the size of Mars. A collision so immense that it surpasses ordinary imagination. The energy released was powerful enough to melt entire worlds. Vast amounts of material were blasted into space. Over time, that material gathered together and eventually became the moon. If this theory is correct, it leads to a deeply poetic idea. The moon is not merely Earth's neighbor, it is part of Earth itself, a fragment separated from our planet during its earliest days, an ancient sibling born from the same cosmic event. Perhaps that is one reason humanity has always felt such a special connection to the moon. In mythology, in poetry, in dreams, it has always appeared as something both familiar and mysterious. And now science seems to be telling the same story in a different language. Not the language of symbols, but the language of data. Yet the final result possesses a similar beauty, a profound connection. Jung believed that human beings are always seeking wholeness, a sense that the seemingly separate pieces of life belong to a larger picture. Perhaps the exploration of the moon is part of that same journey. At first, we viewed it as a distant world, a remote object in the sky. But the more we learned, the more we realized that its story and our story cannot be separated. The history of the moon is part of the history of Earth, and the history of Earth is part of our own history. It is an idea perfectly aligned with the spirit of Apollo. For ultimately, journeys into space do not merely teach us about the universe, they help us understand our place within it. Every answer opens new questions. Every discovery leads to another mystery. And perhaps that is the true beauty of science. Not that it ends curiosity, but that it nourishes it. When Armstrong and Aldrin left the moon, they carried home rocks, data, experimental results, but they also left something behind. The first traces of humanity on another world. Footprints pressed into ancient dust, a flag, a commemorative plaque, and many small objects that will remain long after the astronauts returned home. For on a world without wind and without rain, time behaves differently. Those traces may endure for millions of years, silent, motionless, like whispers of history carried into the future. And it is those traces that lead us into the next chapter of tonight's journey. A chapter about what humanity left behind on the moon. Not only physical objects, but symbols, memories, and proof that there was once a moment in history when humankind looked up at the sky and decided to step forward, the journey home. When we think about Apollo 11, our minds naturally return to the moon, to the footprints, to the first step, to the grey horizon stretching into silence. But every great journey contains two movements, the departure and the return, and in many ways, the return is just as important. For a dream does not truly become part of history until it finds its way home. As Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin prepared to leave the lunar surface, they carried more than rocks and scientific instruments. They carried proof that humanity had crossed a boundary once believed impossible. Proof that the distance between imagination and reality could sometimes be bridged by courage, persistence, and faith. Outside the Eagle, the lunar landscape remained unchanged. The same ancient dust, the same silent craters, the same black sky untouched by atmosphere. The moon did not celebrate. It did not acknowledge the visitors who had arrived from another world. It simply remained what it had always been: silent, ancient, patient. There is something profoundly moving about that image, for nature rarely pauses to recognize human achievement. Mountains do not applaud climbers. Oceans do not congratulate sailors. And the moon did not speak to the men who had traveled nearly 400,000 kilometers to reach it. Yet perhaps that silence was its answer. Carl Jung often observed that the deepest truths do not arrive as declarations. They arrive quietly, like symbols, like dreams, like moments that reveal their meaning only years later. Perhaps the moon offered such a moment, a mirror in which humanity briefly saw itself more clearly. Now the time had come to leave. Inside Eagle, Armstrong and Aldrin began the careful sequence required for liftoff. Every switch, every checklist, every confirmation mattered. There would be no second attempt, no backup vehicle waiting nearby, no rescue mission standing by. If the ascent engine failed, they would remain on the moon forever. NASA understood this reality from the beginning. Entire contingency plans had been written for that possibility. Even speeches had been prepared in advance for a world forced to mourn 2 astronauts stranded beyond Earth. Yet, despite the risks, preparation had brought them to this moment. And preparation now had to become action. The ascent stage of Eagle was a remarkable machine. Unlike the towering Saturn V that launched from Earth, this vehicle was small and fragile in appearance, but it carried an enormous responsibility. It had to lift 2 human beings off another world and place them precisely into lunar orbit. There, somewhere above them, Michael Collins continued his lonely vigil aboard Columbia. Orbit after orbit. Waiting, calculating, trusting. Few reunions in human history have depended upon such precision. 2 spacecraft, traveling thousands of kilometers per hour, separated by the vastness of lunar space, needing to meet almost perfectly. The margin for error was tiny. The consequences of failure were immense. And then the moment arrived. The engine ignited. The upper stage of Eagle separated from its landing platform and rose into the black sky. For the first time in history, human beings launched from the surface of another world. Below them, the descent stage remained behind, a silent monument resting upon the sea of tranquility. Its work completed, its place in history secured forever. As Eagle climbed higher, the moon slowly receded beneath them. The footprints remained, the experiments remained, the plaque remained, the traces of humanity stayed behind. But the explorers themselves were coming home. There is a pattern that appears again and again in mythology. Jung noticed it throughout cultures separated by oceans and centuries. The hero leaves home, enters the unknown, faces trials, discovers something valuable, and then returns, not as the same person who departed, but transformed. The return matters because wisdom has little value if it remains isolated from the world. It must be carried back, shared, integrated. Apollo followed this ancient pattern with remarkable precision. Humanity ventured into the unknown, faced uncertainty, learned something profound, and now carried those lessons home. Eventually, Eagle and Columbia met once again. The docking maneuver succeeded. The hatches opened. 3 astronauts became a crew again. Perhaps no one felt greater relief than Michael Collins. For hours, he had carried responsibilities few people could imagine. Now his friends had returned, alive, safe, together. The journey, however, was still not complete. One final ocean remained, the ocean of space between the moon and Earth. As the spacecraft turned toward home, the blue planet gradually grew larger in their windows. At first, it appeared as a distant sphere suspended in darkness. Then it became brighter, more detailed, more familiar. Many astronauts have described a strange feeling when returning to Earth after viewing it from afar. The planet somehow seems both smaller and more precious. Its atmosphere appears impossibly thin, its oceans impossibly delicate, its life impossibly rare. From space, Earth does not look powerful, it looks vulnerable. Carl Jung believed that genuine wisdom often emerges from a shift in perspective. The world itself may remain unchanged, but the way we see it changes. Apollo gave humanity such a perspective. The astronauts left Earth hoping to learn about the moon. Instead, they returned with a deeper understanding of home. Perhaps that is one of the greatest paradoxes of exploration. Sometimes we travel great distances only to discover what was valuable all along. And as Apollo 11 continued its long voyage back across the darkness, a new chapter was waiting. The chapter of return, the chapter of recovery, the chapter in which the travelers would once again touch the waters of Earth, and millions of people across the planet would watch as 3 explorers emerged from the sea carrying one of humanity's greatest stories. For the dream of reaching the moon was almost complete. Only one final step remained, the step back home, the journey back to Earth. In every great adventure, there is a moment that often receives less attention than the most glorious milestones. It is the moment of returning home. We tend to remember the beginning. We remember the instant when the hero steps into the journey. We remember the trials, the victories, the discoveries, but we rarely pause to reflect upon the meaning of coming back. Apollo 11 is no exception. When people speak of this mission, the world usually remembers the first footprint on the moon. It remembers Neil Armstrong's historic words. It remembers the image of a flag standing upon the grey dust. Yet after all of those extraordinary moments, one crucial task still remained: the journey home. And in many ways, the return was every bit as remarkable as the departure. After completing their work on the lunar surface, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed back inside the Eagle lunar module. Beyond the small windows of the spacecraft stretched a world so quiet that it felt almost surreal. No wind, no birdsong, no sound of flowing water, no signs of life whatsoever, only dusty plains reaching toward the horizon, ancient craters, and a sky of absolute blackness, a landscape that had remained nearly unchanged for billions of years. And yet, for a few brief hours, two human beings had become part of its history. Now they were preparing to leave. There is something deeply moving about this moment, because every journey changes the traveler. No one ever returns exactly as they departed. Carl Jung believed that every path toward human growth resembles an adventure into unknown territory. We leave behind what is familiar, we confront challenges, we discover new truths, and we return with a different understanding of ourselves. In that sense, Apollo was not merely a journey to the moon, it was humanity's journey beyond its former limits. And now, as Armstrong and Aldrin prepared to depart that distant world, they carried home far more than rock samples. They carried a new perspective on humanity's place in the universe. The moment of liftoff from the moon was among the most fragile of the entire mission. Unlike on Earth, there was no rescue team waiting nearby, no alternate landing field, no second chance. If the ascent engine failed, everything would end there. And so, as the time for ignition approached, thousands of people at Mission Control in Houston watched every signal with complete concentration. Above the moon, Michael Collins continued to wait, orbiting patiently aboard the command module Columbia, quietly, steadily, like a lighthouse keeper safeguarding the way home for his friends. Then the moment arrived. The engine ignited. The upper stage of Eagle separated from the landing platform that would remain forever upon the moon. For the first time in history, human beings launched from another world. The very thought of it still inspires wonder. For thousands of years, every human journey had begun on Earth. Every ship, every expedition, every voyage, all had departed from our home planet. But now a spacecraft was leaving the moon, a world nearly 400,000 kilometers away. A feat that only decades earlier belonged entirely to the realm of science fiction. Eagle slowly climbed into the moon's black sky. There were no enormous clouds of smoke like those produced by Saturn V. No roaring thunder, no dramatic spectacle like a launch from Earth. Because there was no atmosphere on the moon to carry sound, everything unfolded in complete silence. A silence that made the moment feel even more extraordinary, like a dream taking place somewhere deep within the cosmos. As Eagle continued to gain altitude, its next objective was a rendezvous with Columbia, a meeting between two spacecraft moving at tremendous speeds. The margin for error was incredibly small. Every calculation had to be correct. Every maneuver had to be flawless. This was the moment when years of preparation by NASA were put to the test. And it was also the moment when Michael Collins's role became indispensable. He was not simply waiting. He was responsible for bringing Columbia to exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Like two leaves drifting along an invisible river through space, they had to meet. Otherwise, the journey home could be jeopardized. Fortunately, everything unfolded according to plan. After hours of careful operations, Eagle and Columbia were reunited in lunar orbit. The three astronauts were together once again. Few moments in Apollo carried such profound relief, not only because the mission was moving closer to success, but because friends had found one another again, safe, whole, alive. After transferring all necessary samples and equipment into Columbia, one final decision was made. Eagle, the spacecraft that had carried humanity to the moon, had completed its purpose. It would not return to Earth. It would remain behind, quietly entering history. There is something deeply symbolic in that moment, because sometimes, in order to continue a journey, we must learn how to let go of the things that helped us get there, even when they once meant everything. And as Columbia turned toward the distant blue planet shining in the darkness, the next chapter of the adventure began. A chapter no longer aimed at the moon, but aimed at home. Yet before they could return home, they still had to face one of the most dangerous challenges of the entire mission: the plunge back through Earth's atmosphere, a journey during which the lives of all 3 astronauts would depend upon a protective layer only a few centimeters thick. As Columbia departed lunar orbit and began the long voyage home, nearly 400,000 kilometers of space stretched before the crew. But strangely enough, the most dangerous part of the mission no longer lay on the moon. It no longer lay within the tense moments of landing, nor in the vast darkness of deep space. It was waiting for them at their own home planet, Earth. At first, that sounds paradoxical. After everything Apollo had endured, how could returning home be more dangerous? Yet that was precisely the reality. To return to Earth, Columbia would have to enter the atmosphere at nearly 39,000 kilometers per hour, faster than any bullet, faster than any aircraft. So fast that the air itself became an invisible wall. When an object travels at such speeds, it does not simply move through the atmosphere. It compresses the air in front of it. Temperatures rise dramatically. A brilliant shell of plasma forms around the spacecraft. Outside temperatures can reach thousands of degrees Celsius, hotter than molten lava, hot enough to melt ordinary metal. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful paradoxes of space exploration. Human beings can survive the near absolute cold of space. Yet when returning home, they must face fire. Not fire in the ordinary sense, but fire created by speed itself, created by the journey itself. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Perhaps every journey of growth contains a similar paradox. We often assume the greatest challenge lies in the unknown land, yet sometimes the greatest challenge comes when we return. When we must reintegrate into the familiar world as changed people, when we must bring our hard-earned wisdom back into ordinary life. Apollo was entering precisely such a moment. After reaching the moon, the challenge now was to bring those experiences safely home. And amid all these dangers stood an unsung hero, a component few people ever truly noticed: the heat shield. If Saturn V was the machine that carried humanity into space, and Eagle was the vehicle that brought them to the moon, then the heat shield was what brought them home. It sat beneath the command module, quietly, silently, without fanfare, without dramatic appearance. Yet the lives of all 3 astronauts depended upon it. As Columbia plunged into Earth's atmosphere, the heat shield began its work. Layer by layer, its special material slowly burned away, carrying immense amounts of heat with it. Engineers called this process ablative shielding. The term sounds technical, yet its meaning is surprisingly symbolic. To protect what lies within, part of itself must be sacrificed. It burns away so that others may live. There is something profoundly moving in that image, because life often works the same way. Many of the things that protect us do so quietly. A parent's love, the sacrifices of those who came before us, the unseen efforts that shape our lives. They are like a heat shield, rarely noticed, yet immeasurably important. During re-entry, communication between Apollo and Earth was temporarily lost. The superheated plasma surrounding the spacecraft blocked radio signals. For several long minutes, Houston could not hear the astronauts' voices, could not know exactly what was happening inside. All they could do was wait, trust, and hope. Those moments felt long for everyone on the ground, because they understood that if something went wrong, there would be no opportunity to intervene. And then, like dawn emerging after a long night, communication returned. Apollo was still there, still safe, still on its way home. A wave of relief swept through mission control. After years of preparation, after billions of dollars invested, after the efforts of hundreds of thousands of people, the dream was approaching a happy conclusion. When the spacecraft slowed sufficiently, enormous parachutes unfolded above the Pacific Ocean. It was a scene both beautiful and simple. After all, the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. After sophisticated guidance systems, after powerful rocket engines, the final meters of the journey were completed by giant fabric canopies catching the wind. Perhaps that, too, carries a lesson. Progress does not always replace simple solutions. Sometimes the oldest technologies remain among the most reliable. On the 24th of July 1969, after 8 historic days, Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. The mission was over. Yet another journey was only beginning. The journey of memory, of legacy, of stories that would be told for generations to come. When the astronauts were lifted aboard the recovery ship, they were no longer the same people who had left Earth just over a week earlier. The world remained the same, but the way they saw it had changed. They had viewed Earth from nearly 400,000 kilometers away, seen their home planet as a small blue sphere suspended within endless darkness, experienced the silence of space, walked upon another world, and returned. Jung believed that every profound journey leads to transformation. The traveler never truly returns to the point of departure, because a part of them has changed forever. Perhaps Apollo was such a journey, not only for the 3 astronauts, but for all of humanity. It expanded our definition of what was possible, expanded the boundaries of imagination, expanded the dreams human beings dared to pursue. Yet even after Apollo 11 returned safely home, one question still lingered in many minds. What if they had brought something back from the moon? Not rocks, not dust, but a form of life never before encountered. Today, that question may sound distant, or even unlikely. But in 1969, NASA took it very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that a special plan had already been prepared for the astronauts immediately after their return. And that story will lead us into the next chapter of tonight's journey: quarantine and the fear of extraterrestrial life. When Apollo 11 safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on the 24th of July 1969, most of the world believed the adventure was over. The 3 astronauts had returned. The moon was behind them. The greatest dangers seemed to have passed. But what is fascinating is that, at the very moment of triumph, a new concern began to emerge. A concern that had nothing to do with rockets, nothing to do with engines, nothing to do with orbits or fuel. It revolved around a simple question: what if they had brought something back from the moon? Today, knowing that the moon is a barren and lifeless world, that question may seem somewhat distant. But imagine yourself in 1969. At that time, humanity had only just touched the moon for the first time. Many mysteries remained unanswered. Scientists knew a great deal, but they also understood how much they did not yet know. And it was precisely that humility before the unknown that led NASA to make a remarkable decision. The Apollo 11 astronauts would be placed in quarantine after their return, not for a few hours, not for a single day, but for several weeks. Not because they were sick, not because there were signs of danger, but because no one could say with absolute certainty that the moon was completely sterile. It is a fascinating historical detail, because it demonstrates that even at the height of success, genuine science remains cautious. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." The greatest questions in life are not always answered immediately. Sometimes they can only be approached through patience, maturity, and a gradual expansion of understanding. Perhaps NASA was acting in that very spirit. They did not know the answer for certain, so they chose caution. They chose responsibility. They chose to protect their home planet before it was too late. When the recovery teams reached Apollo 11 floating on the ocean, special procedures began almost immediately. The astronauts put on biological isolation garments. They were transferred into a controlled environment. Everything unfolded as though they had returned from a world that might contain unknown secrets. Looking back with modern eyes, we may smile at such caution, yet in truth, it was a beautiful expression of scientific thinking. Because science is not absolute certainty. Science is the willingness to admit that we may not yet know everything. Throughout history, many great mistakes have arisen from excessive confidence in what people believed they understood. Apollo 11 reminds us of a different attitude, an attitude of humility before the universe, a willingness to acknowledge how much remains unknown. What is particularly noteworthy is that the fear of extraterrestrial life did not originate in science fiction fantasies. No one believed the astronauts would bring home strange creatures. No one seriously feared monsters from outer space. The real concern was far smaller: bacteria, microorganisms, tiny forms of life invisible to the naked eye. Because Earth's history had already taught humanity an important lesson. The smallest organisms can sometimes have the greatest consequences. We know that an invisible bacterium can reshape civilizations. A microscopic virus can affect millions of lives. And so, the question emerged: what if the moon possessed some form of microorganism entirely unlike anything ever known on Earth? No one knew. And because no one knew, NASA chose to act as though the risk might be real. There is a profound lesson in that. In Jungian psychology, human beings often fear what they do not understand. Jung described this confrontation with the unknown. In ancient myths, the unknown was often represented by dark forests, distant oceans, dragons, unexplored lands. By the 20th century, the imagery had changed. Space became the new forest. The moon became the new unknown territory. And hypothetical microorganisms became the modern version of ancient dragons. That does not mean the fear was irrational, quite the opposite. It was a natural response from a species stepping beyond familiar boundaries. Because whenever we open a new door, we must accept the possibility that something unimaginable may exist on the other side. Perhaps what makes Apollo's quarantine story so fascinating is that it unfolded immediately after one of history's greatest victories. Instead of celebrating right away, instead of appearing before cheering crowds, instead of stepping into ceremonies and parades, the three astronauts entered a confined space, a place that, from one perspective, looked like separation, yet from another perspective, resembled a necessary pause, a quiet interval between the journey itself and a complete return home. And within that pause, emerged one of the most unusual images of the Apollo era, the image of the President of the United States standing outside a pane of glass to greet the heroes who had just returned from the moon. Perhaps one of the strangest images of the 20th century was not human beings walking on the moon, but human beings returning from the moon only to stand behind a transparent wall. Outside stood the President of the United States. Inside stood the three heroes of Apollo 11. They could see one another, they could smile, they could communicate through microphones, but they could not shake hands. They could not touch. They could not truly meet. It was a paradox rich with symbolism. After crossing nearly 400,000 kilometers of space, after leaving Earth itself, after setting foot on another world, the final barrier between them and the rest of humanity was a sheet of glass. On the 24th of July 1969, President Richard Nixon visited the astronauts while they were inside the mobile quarantine facility, a specially designed space intended to prevent any possible biological risk. From the outside, it resembled an ordinary trailer. Yet inside were the men who had just completed one of history's most extraordinary adventures. Nixon stood outside the window and spoke with them. He congratulated them, thanked them, and conveyed the gratitude of millions of people around the world. But what made that moment memorable was not merely the conversation itself. It was the image. An image that feels almost Jungian in its symbolism. The people who had traveled the farthest were separated from the world by the thinnest of barriers. Carl Jung spent many years studying symbols of transformation. He noticed that in many ancient myths and rituals, the hero does not immediately return to society after completing the journey. Instead, there is an intermediate stage, a period suspended between two worlds. No longer the person they once were, yet not fully integrated into their new identity. Apollo 11 seemed to recreate that pattern almost unintentionally. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins had returned to Earth, yet they had not fully returned to ordinary life. For many days, they remained inside quarantine. Scientists continuously monitored their health. Lunar samples were examined with extraordinary care. Every grain of dust, every rock sample, every piece of equipment was handled under strict procedures. This was not fear. It was responsibility. A planet filled with billions of living organisms could not be placed at risk through carelessness. What is interesting is that throughout this period, the public remained fascinated by a single question. Was there something hidden within those lunar samples? Could there exist a form of life humanity had never encountered? Today, we are accustomed to thinking of the moon as a barren world. But in 1969, mystery still surrounded it. For generations, people had imagined lunar cities, extraterrestrial civilizations, strange beings living beneath ancient craters. Science had dismissed most of those ideas long before Apollo. But true science does not rely upon assumptions. It relies upon evidence. And so NASA carefully examined everything. Day after day, the results slowly emerged. There were no signs of extraterrestrial bacteria, no strange organisms, no evidence of life in any of the samples. The moon, just as many scientists had suspected, was essentially sterile, a world far too harsh for life as we know it. At first glance, that may seem disappointing. No dramatic discovery, no mysterious creatures, no proof of alien civilizations. But in reality, that conclusion carried its own value, because science does not exist to confirm exciting stories. It exists to discover truth, even when the truth is simpler than imagination. Jung once wrote, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." Perhaps one of the greatest beauties of science is its patience with reality. Even when reality differs from our expectations, even when it does not provide miraculous stories. In the case of Apollo 11, the truth was that the moon contained no life, yet that did not make it any less extraordinary. If anything, it made us realize how extraordinary life on Earth truly is. For when we look at the moon, we are looking at a world without oceans, without forests, without birdsong, without insects, without colorful sunrises, without rain, without the laughter of children, without any of the countless things we often take for granted. And it is precisely that emptiness that makes the beauty of Earth shine more clearly. Perhaps that is one of Apollo's greatest gifts. Not merely knowledge about the moon, but a new perspective on our home planet. Sometimes we must travel very far to understand the value of what is close to us. Much as Jung suggested that people sometimes need to journey into the unfamiliar regions of the unconscious in order to better understand themselves, Apollo accomplished something similar on the scale of an entire civilization. We traveled to another world in order to understand our own. After weeks of observation, NASA finally concluded that Apollo 11 posed no biological threat. The astronauts were cleared to return to normal life. The quarantine facility had fulfilled its purpose. A unique chapter in the history of space exploration came to an end. Yet when we look back on this entire story, perhaps the most memorable aspect is not whether lunar microbes existed. It is the attitude humanity chose. Caution. humility, a willingness to acknowledge what we do not yet know. These were the qualities that helped Apollo succeed, and they remain the qualities that continue to guide science today. When the three astronauts finally stepped out of quarantine, the world outside had changed, or perhaps it was humanity's way of seeing the world that had changed. Apollo was never merely the story of three individuals, nor simply the story of one nation. It was the achievement of hundreds of thousands of people working quietly behind the scenes. Engineers, mathematicians, technicians, machinists, men and women whose names most of the public would never know. And they will be the focus of the next chapter. A chapter dedicated to those who never stood upon the moon, yet helped humanity reach it. The lessons written in failure. When people remember Apollo 11, they usually remember success. They remember the launch, the moon landing, the famous words spoken by Neil Armstrong, the celebrations that followed, the triumphant return to Earth. History often presents great achievements as though they were inevitable, as though everything unfolded exactly according to plan, as though the path to success was smooth and direct. But reality is rarely so simple, and Apollo was no exception. Long before humanity placed a footprint on the moon, there were failures, mistakes, accidents, moments of disappointment, moments of grief, moments when the dream itself seemed uncertain. In many ways, Apollo was not built only from success. It was built from lessons written in failure. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. There is no awakening without struggle, no transformation without difficulty." Perhaps that is true not only for individuals, but also for civilizations. Perhaps humanity itself had to pass through failure before it could reach the moon. One of the most painful chapters in the Apollo story occurred on the 27th of January, 1967, more than 2 years before Apollo 11. 3 astronauts sat inside a spacecraft during a routine ground test. Their names were Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee. The test was not supposed to be dangerous. The rocket was not even fueled. Nothing dramatic was expected to happen. And then, everything changed. A spark ignited a fire inside the cabin. The atmosphere within the spacecraft was pure oxygen. Flames spread with terrifying speed. Within moments, the situation became catastrophic. The crew had no chance to escape. By the time rescue teams opened the hatch, all 3 astronauts were gone. The tragedy shocked NASA. It shocked the United States. It shocked everyone involved in the dream of reaching the moon. For a brief moment, the future seemed uncertain. Some questioned whether the risks had become too great. Others wondered whether the moon was worth the cost. Still others feared that the program might never recover. Yet what followed revealed something remarkable about human beings. The response was not denial. It was not blame. It was not pretending that the problem did not exist. Instead, NASA began one of the most exhaustive investigations in its history. Engineers examined every detail, every wire, every material, every procedure, every assumption. The organization confronted its mistakes directly, painfully, honestly, relentlessly. Jung believed that growth begins when we are willing to face uncomfortable truths, not when we avoid them, not when we hide from them, but when we look directly at them. Apollo followed that path. The fire exposed weaknesses, so NASA changed. The spacecraft was redesigned. The hatch was improved. Flammable materials were removed. Countless safety procedures were rewritten. The tragedy became a turning point. A painful lesson transformed into wisdom. There is something deeply human about that process, because every life contains its own Apollo 1 moments. Failures we wish had never happened. Mistakes we wish we could erase. Disappointments that leave scars. But sometimes the lessons hidden inside those experiences become the foundation for future success. Not because suffering is desirable, but because growth often emerges from how we respond to suffering. The road to the moon contained other setbacks as well. Test flights that did not go as planned. Technical failures. Near disasters. unexpected problems. Every step forward revealed new challenges, and each challenge demanded new solutions. To the outside world, Apollo 11 appeared as a single glorious achievement, but behind that achievement stood years of trial and error, years of uncertainty, years of learning, years of people refusing to quit. Perhaps that is why the story remains so powerful today, because it reminds us that greatness is not the absence of failure. Greatness is the willingness to continue despite failure. Many people imagine courage as fearlessness. Apollo teaches a different lesson. The engineers were not fearless. The astronauts were not fearless. The mission controllers were not fearless. They understood the risks better than anyone. They knew exactly how much could go wrong, and yet they continued, not because they ignored danger, but because they believed the goal was worth pursuing. Carl Jung often described life as a journey toward wholeness, a process of integrating both light and shadow, success and failure, confidence and doubt, strength and vulnerability. Apollo embodied that idea beautifully. Its triumph cannot be separated from its setbacks. Its victories cannot be separated from its losses. Its success was shaped by everything that came before, including the painful parts. Perhaps this is why the Apollo story continues to resonate across generations. Not simply because humans reached the moon, but because the journey reflects something universal. Every meaningful goal requires perseverance. Every worthwhile dream demands sacrifice. Every great achievement contains invisible chapters that few people ever see. And often, those hidden chapters matter most. The moon landing was not the beginning of the story. It was the result of thousands of lessons learned beforehand. Lessons purchased through effort, through patience, through humility, and sometimes through heartbreak. As Apollo 11 faded into history, the world celebrated what humanity had accomplished. Yet the deeper legacy of Apollo was not only technological, it was psychological. It demonstrated that human beings are capable of learning from failure rather than being defeated by it, of adapting instead of surrendering, of continuing forward even when the path is uncertain. And perhaps that is the lesson that reaches far beyond rockets and spacecraft. Because every generation faces its own impossible challenges. Every individual faces moments of doubt, moments of loss, moments when giving up seems easier. Apollo whispers the same message across the decades. The path to extraordinary places is rarely straight. But those who continue learning, adapting, and moving forward may one day discover that what once seemed impossible has quietly become reality. And it is from that realization that the final chapter of Apollo's legacy begins. A legacy not measured only by footprints on the moon, but by the enduring belief that humanity can reach farther than it ever imagined. The lessons behind success. When we look back at Apollo 11 from the distance of more than half a century, it is easy to become captivated by the glow of its success. The iconic images, the triumphant moments, the cheers echoing through mission control in Houston, the first footprints on the moon. Together, they seem to form a perfect story. A story in which everything unfolded exactly as planned. But reality was not like that. If there is one profound lesson Apollo left behind, it is the truth that the greatest successes are often built upon the foundation of painful failures. Behind every victory are countless tests, countless mistakes, countless moments when things did not go as expected. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Perhaps those words are true not only for the psychological growth of an individual, perhaps they are equally true for the growth of an entire civilization. Apollo 11 did not appear out of nowhere. It was born from lessons, and one of the most painful lessons was called Apollo 1. The 27th of January 1967, the Apollo program was still in its early stages. 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were conducting a routine ground test. It was not a launch, not a flight, just a standard procedure, an ordinary task. Then a spark appeared. Inside the oxygen-rich environment of the spacecraft cabin, flames spread with terrifying speed. Within seconds, the situation spiraled out of control. The 3 astronauts could not escape, and they lost their lives. The entire United States was stunned. NASA entered a period of crisis. The dream of sending humans to the moon suddenly seemed overshadowed by grief and doubt. In the days that followed, many people asked difficult questions. Should the Apollo program continue? Had the cost become too great? Had humanity's ambition to conquer space gone too far? These were not easy questions, because behind them stood human lives. Families who had lost loved ones, colleagues who had lost friends, a nation struggling to understand the tragedy. Yet what stands out most is that NASA did not choose to avoid failure. They did not attempt to hide it. They did not search for convenient excuses. Instead, they did something far more difficult. They confronted it. Every detail of the disaster was investigated. Every cause was analyzed. Every mistake was examined with honesty and rigor. Perhaps this is one of the most admirable qualities of science. Not the ability to always be right, but the ability to learn when it is wrong. Jung believed that true growth begins when we confront our shadow, the hidden and uncomfortable parts of ourselves. Not by denying them, but by understanding them. Apollo had to face its own shadow. Design flaws, incomplete procedures, assumptions that proved incorrect. After Apollo 1, nearly every aspect of spacecraft safety was reconsidered. The hatch design was changed. Flammable materials were removed. Critical systems were improved. Hundreds of new safety standards were introduced. It was a process that demanded time, effort, and sometimes great emotional pain. Yet those changes would help save the lives of future Apollo astronauts. There is something fascinating about failure. In the moment it happens, failure often appears only as loss. We see what was taken away, what was not achieved, what hurts. But over time, if faced honestly, failure can become a teacher. A strict teacher, but an invaluable one. Apollo 11 stands as a powerful example of that truth. Every success it achieved carried lessons paid for by the past. And it was not only Apollo 1. Before Armstrong ever stepped onto the moon, thousands of tests had failed. Rockets exploded, systems malfunctioned. Problems emerged where solutions were thought to exist. Yet engineers did not treat failure as a reason to quit. They treated it as information. Every failure revealed a lesson. Every mistake exposed an opportunity for improvement. Step by step, the system became better, safer, more reliable. Perhaps life works in much the same way. Rarely do we learn the most from our perfect days. We often learn more from our difficult ones, from our stumbles, from the moments when we must begin again, from the times we are forced to confront what we previously overlooked. Apollo is not the story of people who never failed. Apollo is the story of people who never stopped learning from failure, and it was that spirit that brought them closer to the moon. Yet even after those lessons had been learned, another essential ingredient remained: preparation. Preparation on a scale that is almost difficult to imagine. Because before an astronaut ever faced a real emergency, they had already faced similar emergencies thousands of times during training. If you could walk into a NASA training center during the 1960s, one thing might surprise you. Astronauts did not spend most of their time rehearsing success. They spent most of their time rehearsing failure. That may sound strange. When pursuing a great goal, most of us prefer to imagine everything going smoothly. We picture victory, achievement, a successful outcome. NASA chose a different approach. What if the electrical system failed? What if the computer malfunctioned? What if communications were lost? What if the engine failed to respond? What if everything went wrong? Perhaps this was one of Apollo's greatest secrets. They did not prepare for an ideal world. They prepared for the real one. A world where mistakes happen. A world where surprises exist. A world where human beings must face the unknown. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Apollo reflected that spirit perfectly. NASA understood that they could not control every event. They could not eliminate all risk, but they could choose how to respond when risk appeared. And so astronauts were constantly placed into simulated crises. Inside training simulators, engineers would suddenly create emergencies. A warning light would appear. A system would fail. A piece of data would become abnormal. The astronauts had to respond immediately. There was no time for panic, no time for hesitation. Decisions had to be made under pressure. Day after day, month after month, the exercises were repeated until the correct response became instinct. Perhaps that is why, during the most dangerous moments of Apollo 11, we hear so little panic. When the 1,201 and 1,202 alarms appeared during landing, when fuel was running low, when millions of people held their breath, Armstrong remained calm. Houston remained calm, not because they felt no pressure, but because they had faced similar situations hundreds of times before. There is a saying, often heard in aviation, you do not rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. Apollo was a perfect example of that principle. Yet alongside the human beings, another silent participant played a crucial role. A participant with no emotions, no dreams, no courage, but one that proved indispensable: the computer. Today, when the smartphone in our pocket is more powerful than many computers of the 1960s, it is difficult to appreciate what Apollo achieved with the technology of its era. The Apollo Guidance Computer, or AGC, possessed remarkably limited computing power by modern standards. Its memory was smaller than that of a single photograph stored on a phone today. Yet what mattered was not its power, it was its reliability. It was built to function under the harshest conditions imaginable. In space, under extreme vibration, in situations where even the smallest error could lead to disaster. What is truly remarkable is that Apollo was not a victory of humans over machines, nor was it a victory of machines over humans. It was a victory of cooperation. Computers performed complex calculations. Humans exercised judgment. Computers supplied data. Humans contributed intuition and experience. One of the most famous examples occurred during Eagle's descent to the lunar surface. When the computer became overloaded, it generated the famous 1,201 and 1,202 alarms. It did not hide the problem. It informed the humans. Houston analyzed the data. Armstrong assessed the situation, and together, the decision was made to continue the landing. That was not a triumph of computers, nor a triumph of humans alone. It was a triumph of collaboration. Perhaps this is an especially relevant lesson today. As artificial intelligence and advanced technology continue to evolve, many people worry that humans will one day be replaced. Apollo suggests a different perspective. The greatest achievements often emerge when technology and human beings complement one another, when each contributes its unique strengths. Jung believed that maturity does not come from eliminating opposing forces within ourselves. It comes from integrating them: consciousness and the unconscious, reason and emotion, light and shadow. Apollo was also an act of integration, a harmony between science and courage, between machines and people, between logic and intuition. Perhaps that is why this story still carries such power more than 50 years later, because it is not merely a story about rockets or about the moon. It is a story about how human beings grow, how we learn from mistakes, how we transform failure into wisdom, how we prepare for the unknown, and ultimately, how we achieve what once seemed impossible. When Apollo 11 succeeded, the world saw more than a flag standing on the moon. The world saw proof of how far knowledge, perseverance, and the willingness to learn can carry humanity. Yet perhaps Apollo's deepest legacy was not left on the moon. It was left in the way the journey transformed our perception of Earth itself. For after seeing home from nearly 400,000 kilometers away, the astronauts realized something no one had ever seen so clearly before, that all borders disappear. That many differences suddenly seem small, that our fragile blue world is the shared home of us all, and it is that realization that will lead us into the next chapter. The moon changed how we see Earth. Sometimes, to truly see something, we must first move away from it. A person may spend an entire lifetime in a city without ever noticing its beauty. Someone may live alongside their family every day and slowly forget the value of their presence. A person may walk upon Earth for an entire lifetime without ever truly seeing the planet they call home. Perhaps this is one of the deepest paradoxes of the human experience. The things closest to us are often the hardest to see clearly, and in a very special way, Apollo 11 helped humanity see Earth for the very first time. That may sound strange. After all, human beings have lived on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. We have mapped continents, crossed oceans, circled the globe. Yet all of those experiences took place from within the planet itself. Apollo was the first time we traveled far enough away to see Earth as a whole, not as a nation, not as a continent, not as a particular homeland, but as a world, one world. As Apollo journeyed away from Earth and toward the moon, the astronauts began to witness an image unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. A small blue and white sphere floating in the endless blackness of space. No familiar cities, no roads, no buildings, no borders that people had spent centuries defending, disputing, or dividing. Only white clouds drifting slowly across the surface. Deep blue oceans. Continents painted like delicate brushstrokes upon a living canvas. Perhaps this is one of the most powerful images ever produced by science, not because of its technical complexity, but because of its psychological impact. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." It is fascinating to consider that spaceflight, in a physical sense, was humanity's greatest journey outward. Yet psychologically, it encouraged humanity to look inward. For when the astronauts gazed back toward Earth from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, they were not simply looking at a planet, they were looking at home. And for the first time, that home appeared in all of its fragility. From the ground, Earth seems enormous. Its oceans appear endless. Its mountains seem permanent. Its nations feel eternal. But from space, everything changes. Earth becomes small. Not small in the sense of being insignificant. Small in the sense of being precious, like a tiny flame burning in an infinite darkness. Like a green island floating in the vast ocean of the cosmos. There is a famous observation shared by many Apollo astronauts. Several of them later said that seeing Earth from afar changed them forever. Not because of the moon, but because of Earth. They had left home to explore another world. Yet the thing that moved them most deeply was the world they had always known. That idea feels remarkably close to what Jung described as the expansion of consciousness. Sometimes growth does not come from discovering something entirely new. Sometimes it comes from seeing something familiar through new eyes. Apollo did exactly that for humanity. It did not change Earth. It changed how we saw Earth. One of the most striking experiences reported by astronauts was the absence of borders. From above, no nation was outlined by clear lines. No walls stretched across continents. No colors marked where one people ended and another began. All that existed were the patterns of nature, rivers, mountain ranges, oceans, clouds. The divisions humanity had spent thousands of years creating seemed to disappear completely when viewed from space. Perhaps this was one of Apollo's most profound lessons. Before we are citizens of any nation, we are inhabitants of the same planet. Jung devoted much of his life to exploring what connects human beings. He believed that beneath our differences in language, culture, and belief lies a deeper layer shared by all. He called it the collective unconscious. In a sense, the image of Earth seen from the moon transformed that idea into a visual symbol, a symbol showing that many of our differences are merely surface layers. Beneath them, we belong to the same story, the same journey, the same world. And that realization continued to spread in the years following Apollo, not only in science, not only in politics, but in the way humanity thought about itself. Some photographs capture a moment, some capture an event, and then there are photographs that change the way an entire civilization sees itself. The first images of Earth from space belong to that final category. Before Apollo, humanity already knew Earth was a planet. Scientists had proven it long before. Maps described the shapes of continents. Astronomers calculated the size and orbit of our world. But knowing something and truly feeling it are often very different experiences. Apollo transformed knowledge into experience. It transformed a scientific fact into a profound emotion. When those images of Earth arrived from space, millions of people saw their planet as a complete entity for the first time, undivided, unfragmented, unconfined by the borders drawn on maps. Simply a beautiful blue and white sphere suspended within an endless darkness. Many historians later argued that one of Apollo's greatest legacies was not found on the moon. It was found within those photographs, because sometimes a single image can accomplish what thousands of speeches cannot. It touches emotions. It transforms perception. It invites people to see the world through different eyes. For perhaps the first time in history, humanity clearly recognized the fragility of its home. From the surface, Earth seems limitless. Forests stretch toward distant horizons. Oceans extend beyond sight. Mountains endure across generations. But from space, all of it fits within a small sphere. A single world wrapped in an atmosphere so astonishingly thin that it appears almost delicate. Viewed from far enough away, the layer of air that sustains all life on Earth resembles little more than a faint mist surrounding the planet. A fragile veil containing every forest, every river, every ocean, every city, every civilization, every love story, every dream, and every life that has ever existed. Perhaps never before had that truth appeared so clearly. Carl Jung once wrote, "The little world of childhood with its family background is a model of the world." If we extend that idea, perhaps Earth itself is humanity's shared home, a home we often forget we are sharing together. Apollo reminded us of that fact. Seen from the moon, no nation appears greater than another. No people appear more important than another. No borders cut across the oceans. The lines humanity created simply vanish. What remains is a single planet, a single home, a single community of life sharing a tiny blue island in the universe. This is one reason many scholars believe the Apollo missions helped inspire the modern environmental movement, not because astronauts became environmental activists, but because the images they brought home transformed collective awareness. People began to see Earth as a unified system, a place where everything is connected. Forests influence climate. Oceans influence weather. Actions in one region can create consequences elsewhere. Today, such ideas may seem familiar, but in the late 1960s, they felt revolutionary. Apollo helped humanity understand that we do not merely live on Earth, we depend upon it. And perhaps that realization remains one of the greatest gifts the space program ever gave us. Jung spent much of his life studying connections between symbols, between cultures, between consciousness and the unconscious. Apollo seemed to expand that idea to a planetary scale. It revealed that all life on Earth is connected, that all people share the same atmosphere, the same oceans, the same destiny. Perhaps that is why many astronauts later described seeing Earth from space as an experience that felt almost spiritual. Not because they witnessed something supernatural, but because they saw something with extraordinary clarity, a clarity difficult to express in words, that we are all traveling together, that our everyday divisions may be smaller than we imagine, That life becomes infinitely more precious when viewed from the distance of the stars. There is a beautiful irony here. Apollo was created to take human beings to the moon. Yet one of its deepest impacts was changing how we see Earth. It expanded humanity's perspective, not merely geographically, not merely scientifically, but psychologically. It helped us recognize that we are part of something larger, part of a planet, part of a shared history, part of a story billions of years in the making. Perhaps this is what Jung meant when he emphasized the importance of understanding one's place within a greater whole. For only when we understand what we belong to can we truly understand ourselves. Apollo did not simply show us the moon, it showed us ourselves. And from that realization, a new legacy began to emerge. A legacy far beyond rockets, computers, or technology. A legacy of inspiration, of imagination, of generations of young people looking up at the night sky and believing that things once thought impossible might someday become reality. And that is the story we will continue to explore in the next chapter. The legacy of Apollo 11. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon in July 1969, very few people could have imagined that the moment would continue sending ripples through history for decades to come. From the outside, Apollo 11 appears to have ended long ago. The Saturn V rockets are no longer flying. The astronauts returned safely to Earth. The control rooms of the 1960s have become part of history. Yet, in a deeper sense, Apollo never truly ended. For the greatest events in history do not merely change the present, they change the future. They plant invisible seeds in the minds of generations. And over time, those seeds quietly begin to grow. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Apollo 11 presents a fascinating paradox. At that moment, it was the farthest journey humanity had ever undertaken, a voyage outward into the cosmos. Yet its most profound impact occurred within the human mind. It expanded the boundaries of what we believed was possible. And sometimes, the greatest changes in history begin with exactly that, belief. Before Apollo, the moon was a dream. After Apollo, the moon became a place where human beings had actually been. The difference between those two realities is far greater than the nearly 400,000 kilometers separating Earth from the moon. It is the difference between imagination and reality, between hope and evidence, between the impossible and the proven. Perhaps that is why Apollo 11 became a source of inspiration for millions of children around the world. In the years following the landing, countless boys and girls looked up at the night sky with different eyes. They no longer saw only distant stars. They no longer saw the moon as a mysterious object. They saw possibility. They saw the future. They saw paths that previous generations had never walked. Some would grow up to become engineers. Some became scientists. Some became astronauts. Others entered completely different fields. Yet they all carried the same lesson. The limits of today do not have to be the limits of tomorrow. There is a famous saying, often repeated within the scientific community, "You can't be what you can't see." Apollo allowed the world to see something once considered impossible, and in doing so, it expanded the imagination of millions. If we study the history of science, we discover something fascinating. Major breakthroughs rarely influence only one field. Their effects spread outward. Like ripples in water, they create wider and wider circles of impact. Apollo was no exception. Its influence extended far beyond aerospace engineering, far beyond laboratories, far beyond universities. It entered culture, art, cinema, and the way humanity told stories about the future. Before Apollo, many works of science fiction felt like distant fantasies. After Apollo, those dreams suddenly seemed more realistic. People began seriously discussing space stations, interplanetary travel, the exploration of Mars, and the possibility of humanity living beyond Earth. Ideas that once belonged solely to imagination gradually entered the realm of science. Perhaps this was one of Apollo's greatest gifts. Not technology, not rockets, but the expansion of our collective imagination. Jung believed that symbols possess the power to shape the psychology of an entire age. And if we were asked to choose one of the most powerful symbols of the 20th century, the footprint on the moon would surely be among the strongest candidates, because it represents far more than a technical achievement. It represents curiosity, courage, and humanity's ability to transcend limits once thought permanent. For decades after Apollo 11, that footprint continued appearing in textbooks, photographs, films, speeches, and stories meant to inspire future generations. It became a global symbol, a reminder that history is shaped not only by what humanity has accomplished, but by what humanity dares to believe it can accomplish. And as Apollo became part of human culture, another fascinating phenomenon began to emerge. Questions, doubts, conspiracy theories. Some people began asking whether the moon landing had really happened at all. At first glance, this seems strange. Apollo remains one of the most thoroughly documented events in modern history. Yet from a psychological perspective, the phenomenon is worth reflecting upon, because sometimes, when people encounter achievements that seem extraordinarily large, the mind struggles to accept them, and that leads us to a deeper story. A story about belief, about skepticism, and about evidence. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of history is the way great events continue living in the human imagination long after they have ended. Sometimes they become sources of inspiration, sometimes cultural symbols, and sometimes, strangely enough, subjects of suspicion. Apollo 11 was no exception. In the decades after the moon landing, various conspiracy theories emerged. Some claimed the landing had been staged. Others argued that the famous images were created on a secret film set. Yet Apollo remains one of the most extensively verified events in human history. Thousands of engineers participated. Hundreds of scientists examined the data. Independent tracking stations around the world monitored the mission. Hundreds of kilograms of lunar samples were returned to Earth. The laser reflectors left on the moon are still used today, and modern spacecraft have photographed Apollo landing sites from lunar orbit. Yet the existence of these doubts reveals something intriguing about human psychology. Carl Jung spent years studying how people create stories to explain the world around them. He observed that when confronted with events beyond familiar frameworks, the mind often searches for alternative explanations that restore a sense of certainty and control. In a sense, Apollo was simply too extraordinary, too ambitious, too far beyond what many believed possible. And sometimes the hardest thing to believe is not something false, but something true that exceeds the limits of our imagination. Still, more important than any controversy is the reality that Apollo's evidence remains, not only in historical records, not only in lunar rocks, not only in scientific data, but in its lasting influence on the world. For if Apollo had been merely a moment, it would likely have been forgotten long ago. Instead, Apollo became the beginning of a new chapter. After Apollo 11, additional missions continued carrying humans to the moon. Apollo 12, Apollo 14, Apollo 15, Apollo 16, Apollo 17. Each mission returned with more knowledge, more samples, and deeper insights into Earth's nearest celestial neighbor. Astronauts traveled farther across the lunar surface, used lunar rovers, conducted increasingly sophisticated scientific experiments. If Apollo 11 was the first step, the missions that followed were the next chapters of a book humanity had only just begun to read. What is remarkable is that Apollo's legacy extends far beyond space exploration. Many technologies developed for the program eventually found their way into everyday life. Advances in electronics, computing, materials science, telecommunications, and data management all accelerated by the need to solve problems that had never existed before. Yet perhaps Apollo's greatest influence was not technological at all. Perhaps it was imagination. Millions of children growing up during the 1970s and 1980s encountered Apollo in textbooks, documentaries, and stories told by parents and teachers. For many, it was the first time they realized that science was more than formulas in a book. It was an adventure, a journey of discovery, a doorway into the unknown. Countless scientists, engineers, and astronauts later said their earliest inspiration came from Apollo, a photograph, a story, a moment when they saw human beings standing on the moon and thought, if that is possible, perhaps I can do something extraordinary too. Jung believed that cultures are guided by powerful symbols. In ancient myths, heroes crossed oceans, climbed sacred mountains, faced monsters, and returned with wisdom for their communities. In the 20th century, Apollo became a modern version of the same story. There were no dragons, no enchanted forests, no mythical islands. Instead, there was space, the moon, and technical challenges that seemed impossible. Yet the structure remained unchanged. The hero leaves the familiar world, enters the unknown, faces danger, gains knowledge, and returns to share it with others. Perhaps this is why Apollo continues to captivate people born long after the event itself, because at its deepest level, it is not merely a story about technology. It is a story about humanity's enduring desire to explore, the same desire that once carried our ancestors across oceans, across deserts, over mountains, and eventually to the moon. Yet Apollo was never the end of that journey. It was only a chapter, a very large chapter, a very beautiful chapter, but still only one chapter in a much longer human story. When the Apollo program ended in 1972, humans never returned to the moon. Many believed the dream had ended. In reality, it was simply waiting for the right moment to begin again. Today, a new generation of engineers and astronauts is preparing for a return. New rockets are being built, new missions are being planned, new dreams are taking shape. Apollo has become history, but the spirit of Apollo still points toward the future. And it is that future that brings us to the final chapter of tonight's journey. A chapter not about what humanity has already accomplished, but about what humanity may accomplish next. A chapter about the moon, about Mars, and about worlds even farther away waiting to be explored. That is the story of the future beyond the moon. That is the story of what comes next. Because the moon was never meant to be the final destination. It was a beginning, a first step, a distant shoreline glimpsed by a civilization just beginning to sail beyond its home waters. When Apollo 11 landed in 1969, humanity proved something extraordinary. Not merely that we could reach another world, but that we could transform imagination into reality. That we could look at an impossible dream and, through knowledge, courage, and cooperation, make it real. And perhaps that remains Apollo's greatest lesson. The future is not something we discover, it is something we create. Today, more than half a century later, a new generation stands where the Apollo generation once stood. New rockets rise from launch pads. New spacecraft are being built. New explorers are preparing for journeys their grandparents could only imagine. Once again, humanity is looking toward the moon, not merely to visit, but to stay, to build, to learn, to prepare for voyages even farther away. Beyond the moon lies Mars, a world of vast deserts and ancient mysteries, a planet that has lived in human imagination for centuries. For many, Mars is what the moon once was, a distant dream, a destination that feels both impossibly far and strangely inevitable. And perhaps one day, somewhere in the future, a human footprint will appear in Martian soil, just as Armstrong's footprint appeared in the dust of the moon. A child who has not yet been born may someday stand beneath a pink Martian sky and look back toward Earth as a small blue star. And when that moment arrives, it will not belong only to that explorer. It will belong to all of us, just as Apollo belongs to all of us. Carl Jung believed that the deepest human stories are never truly about places. They are about transformation, about becoming, about crossing thresholds and returning changed. In that sense, the story of Apollo was never simply about the moon. It was about humanity discovering what it was capable of becoming. The moon changed how we see Earth, but Apollo changed how we see ourselves. It reminded us that our limits are often farther away than we imagine. That curiosity can carry us beyond fear. That cooperation can accomplish what individuals alone cannot. And that every generation inherits horizons it did not create and leaves new horizons for those who follow. Tonight, as we look back on Apollo 11, we are not merely remembering a mission, we are remembering a moment when humanity dared to believe that the impossible might be possible. A moment when hundreds of thousands of people worked together toward a single dream. A moment when a species born on one small planet reached out and touched another world. And perhaps that is why the story still matters. Because the journey is not over. The stars remain above us. The planets still wait in silence. The universe is still filled with unanswered questions. And somewhere, perhaps in a classroom, perhaps beneath a quiet night sky, perhaps listening to this story before sleep, another future explorer is looking upward, dreaming, wandering, preparing for a journey that has not yet begun. For the story of Apollo is not only the story of the past, it is the story of what humanity may yet become. And in that sense, the greatest chapter may still be waiting to be written. Good night, and thank you for joining this journey through one of the most extraordinary adventures in human history.